Okay.
Yeah, but you know what?
Yeah, no. Hey, how are you? What's going on?
How are you, buddy? Well, you know, accountability and such.
My name is Pudding. I noticed you there. Oh, you're Pudding.
So the house is okay. Yeah. It's the Senate. They're like, you know what? Public area. Yeah. Our court case is up down to Western Florida.
Yeah.
Which is actually
Good.
well, the Supreme Court is finally doing that, so how are things?
Hey, how are you? How's everything? Good to see you.
Sorry if it's possible.
But this is good.
Okay.
But I've been here all day talking to senators. They seem to be talking. As long as we're still talking, we're talking.
Oh, absolutely.
You got it. It's all good. Good to see you.
Thank you.
All right. So how are you doing?
Well, because I know that's yes. Yeah. Because
Technically, nothing's wrong.
But I totally understand moving back to the city.
And you know, Mayor,
I know. Yeah. Hey, Renee. How are you? Hey, how's life treating? I'm trying. Well, I'm getting off all my steroids. So I'm on all the meds. I got a thing. I'm feeling like it a little bit, you know? It's hard down here. Yeah, it's hard to lose it. Oh. Yeah, you just got to drink a lot of water and watch those dinners. If you can, we're the why. It's the why. Hey, how are you, buddy?
Not a big deal. I saw Jack, he said it was, he said the major.
Hey, what's up?
Not-
How are you?
I'm good. But yeah, when he said you're running well,
Better now. I was looking
I'm the ranking member.
Thank you so much.
like,
That's right. We bring the comedy. How are you? How are you, my friend? Good to see you as well. Are you
Because you're a Royals fan?
Not a big deal.
That's a good thing. I'm here, I'm live. I'm working.
I guess you're right. We're not special,
Oh, it's actually weird having.
He said if I could do that really fast. Right. I can't believe you can do
So where does she have? Just out of Colorado.
Yeah, I know.
Where she?
This art.
They cut it all out. The reason that they cut it all out was just. So when they learned that, they said, well, we're not gonna give you any more money. But how does she mind it? Where does she mind it? She had a couple of funds of them. She called me. She broke it down. I'm like, she said she had a couple of funds. I forgot I was explaining to her, but she knew where to find it.
That's what she does. She's like, yeah, dude. Yeah, over.
See what you shape.
Good to see you.
Emerging issues are not coming to order. Please call the roll. Here.
Representative Cross, Representative LaFever, Representative Bonded, Representative Corona, Representative Hazelton, Representative Hicks, Representative Lance, Representative Munsell, Representative Page, Representative Rowden, Representative Zaire. We have a quorum.
Quorum being established, and for everyone's understanding of how we're going to do this tonight, we are not going to have an executive session. There'll be no votes taken tonight. We are going to hear only legislation related to earnings taxes. The bills we're going to hear are House Bill 1857 by Representative Matthews, House Bills 1886 and 1887 by Representative Delegan, House Bill 1809 by Representative English. Because each of these bills deal with the earnings tax and the repeal of same, What I'm going to have them do is I'm going to have those three bill sponsors come up together, each one individually present his bill and explain what they do and how they're different from each other. The committee can ask them questions as a group or individually, depending on if committee members have questions, and then we will take positive and or pro and con testimony after that. Hopefully that will speed up the process, since my guess is that most people that are for one of the bills will be for all the bills. Most people that are against one bill will be against all of the bills. If that's not the case, feel free to explain that in your testimony. For each time, I know we're going to have a lot of people here that will testify. My preference is to limit testimony to 3 minutes per witness, excluding Q&A, 30 minutes per side. That 30 minutes per side is probably going to bend a little bit, but that's the goal, to try to keep us as much as possible within the realms of our time limit. So with that, would Representative Matthews, Dogan, and English come up? And we may need an answer chair. And we'll begin with Representative Matthews, and then Representative English, and then Representative Dogan, in that order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Kirk Matthews. I represent House District 110, which includes Southwest St. Louis County and part of Eastern Franklin County. And I'm here to present House Bill 1857 and thank the committee for the opportunity to do so. This bill addresses the 1% city income tax, also referred to as an earning tax, that is authorized by state law and imposes a tax of 1% on the income of every business located in St. Louis and Kansas City, and every individual who either lives or works in Kansas City and St. Louis. Those are the only two cities in the state that are authorized to tax income, which is obviously a third layer of income tax on top of the state and federal income tax. Less than 7% of local governments across the country tax income, and 75% of those are located in only 2 states. This issue is important to me because I have constituents in my district that pay the earning tax if they commute to St. Louis City for work. They also pay the same rate as someone who lives and works in the city. And there are a few key points I'd like to mention regarding this tax. This tax is clearly a disincentive to live in the city, to work in the city, to start a business in the city, or to relocate a business in the city. And in fact, we just spent time on the floor upstairs talking about how important it is for the city of St. Louis to retain the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA. And just last week, in a letter to the editor of the Post-Dispatch, the mayor of Belleville, Illinois, was attempting to persuade the NGA to relocate to Illinois, promoting the 1% raise each employee would get by not working in St. Louis. To further illustrate this point, 2 weeks ago, a St. Louis City Alderman was interviewed on KMOX radio and was asked why some companies have received abatements from the tax. His response was, because we want to attract businesses to the city, perfectly making my point that this tax is an impediment to growing business in the St. Louis area. Now, you will no doubt hear that the citizens of these cities get to vote on this tax every 5 years, and they typically pass by wide margins. However, I think it's important to note that Kansas City has stated that less than 50% of the people required to pay the tax actually get to vote on it. And I think it's been more difficult getting that data from St. Louis. I think we may have just received some data that says 60% of those required to pay the tax on the St. Louis side do not actually get to vote on the tax. The city of St. Louis has lost 63% of its population since this tax has been in place. And in St. Louis, there are law firms and developers getting special deals on this tax, but the average citizen pays the full 1% on their first dollar of income. This is a regressive tax, hurting those the most who are least able to afford it. When I filed the bill, the Maryland case had just been decided by the Supreme Court, bringing into question the constitutionality of our earning tax law here in Missouri. Now, as originally filed, my bill also eliminates the Kansas City earning tax because I believe this tax is hurting both both of our two major cities. That being said, we all know that the Senate has carved Kansas City out. Now, I know Kansas City is here to testify against the bill today, and while I'm disappointed that Kansas City doesn't want to explore a more pro-growth tax policy, I want to let the committee know that I'm willing to follow the path of the Senate and focus on the St. Louis solution in this bill. My primary interest is St. Louis because that's what impacts my constituents. And I recognize we may have to address each city separately. On that note, I want to commend Mayor Slay of St. Louis for stepping up and recognizing that this tax is a problem. If we're able to provide tax relief for the citizens of St. Louis, we may, down the road, have an interesting case study to pursue the same policy in Kansas City. I know this tax brings in significant revenue, and you're about to hear emotional opposition to this bill, citing the city's inability to provide vital services like police and fire protection. I'm not interested in passing legislation that requires massive cuts to police, fire, and other critical public services. But I don't believe this legislation has to end in cutting those critical services. There have been several studies about how to generate replacement revenue, and there are likely savings to be realized by modernizing city government. However, this tax is too big of a problem to sweep under the rug and not start working on a solution. In closing, I believe we really need to start a discussion, and I'll remind the committee that we have more than 900 cities across this state and 15,000 local governments across the country who operate safe communities without such another tax on income.
Representative English.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Committee. State Representative Keith English. I represent the 68th District, which is North St. Louis County. Thank you for the opportunity to hear the bill today. I won't get into the repeating of what we just heard, but a few things that the reason why I filed this bill is that we were sworn to preserve and protect and defend the Constitution. And when I found out that another city had an earnings tax like I had paid, I'm an IBEW electrician. I work in the city of St. Louis. I work in Metropolitan Square, Anheuser-Busch, AT&T downtown. I paid that earnings tax working in accounting. And I don't have a problem paying that earnings tax when I work in the city of St. Louis because I believe that I get the best police protection that I can when I'm working downtown. I believe that the fire department needs this earnings tax, but the reason why I filed it was because the constitutionality of the bill. And I know that in a U.S. Supreme Court decision, both Kansas City and St. Louis must offer a full tax credit to the thousands of residents who pay the earnings tax. Not speaking for Kansas City, but only St. Louis, that I've been satisfied with the response and the information given to me by the western side of our state, and would be open, as the gentleman had just spoke, to mirroring the Senate bill that removes Kansas City from the bill. It's my understanding, it has been told that the city of St. Louis policy of providing only partial credit to the income tax paid by other states is happening, and it is unconstitutional. The effect of this scheme is that some of the income earned by the St. Louis residents outside the state is taxed twice, which we know is double taxation, which is against the Constitution. I would like to suggest solving the problem by giving residents a full credit for all the income taxes that paid by other states, which Kansas already does this. You need to analyze local tax, and if it were a state tax. Some states already give their residents a tax credit for local income tax that they pay, like Illinois, for example, provides a full credit for those residents who work in St. Louis and pay its 1% earnings tax, precisely the policy that St. Louis should now be required to follow. The city of St. Louis may argue that the earnings tax isn't really a state tax, and therefore doesn't fall under the court's ruling, but I rejected that argument. After speaking with Mayor Slay, I understand that they recognize this problem, and I would be willing to withdraw my bill if they could prove that they're fixing this problem. That's the constitutionality part. And I'm not in favor of repealing the 1% earnings tax, but just the constitutionality part that they're currently in violation of. That's all I have.
Representative David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I've got really kind of three primary objections to this tax. The first one was touched upon by Representative Matthews, the fact that it's a regressive tax. I'm a person who grew up in a pretty modest socioeconomic background, in North St. Louis County. My family didn't have a whole lot of money. I have a lot of relatives that are union members, a lot of relatives who are, on government assistance programs and, not exactly the wealthiest 1%. So when you have a tax like this that is regressive in nature and that is paid at the same rate by the person on the lowest end of the economic spectrum, and the same rate is paid at the top end of the economic spectrum, and yet you have these loopholes, and you guys have an article right here from the Riverfront Times in St. Louis talking about how everyone in St. Louis is not paying this earnings tax because there's huge loopholes for corporate lawyers and insurance executives at a couple companies that I won't name, but you can read in the article. When the little guy has no way of getting an exemption from this tax, but the well-connected, the wealthy have a way of doing that so that everybody's not paying the tax, I have a huge problem for that. That's a hindrance for the average guy, for the working families of St. Louis and its surrounding areas, and that's frankly offensive to me, Mr. Chairman. So that's number one. Number two is the fact that 60% of the people who pay this tax are non-residents of St. Louis City. And I just saw that information on the St. Louis City website. You have that handout in front of you as well. 30% of the people are from surrounding counties in Missouri, 30% are from Illinois. So 40%, only 40% of the people who pay this tax and are able to vote on its retention live in St. Louis City. You can't tell me that it wouldn't be possible for the city of St. Louis to figure out a way to include those folks in the retention elections. If they don't, if they keep on doing what they're doing, I see that as taxation without representation. These people are working hard every day, paying 1% of their income to an entity where they don't see the benefits. They're not taking advantage of those police and fire services. They don't get the city's trash services. They don't get the city's road services and all the other things that the city provides. And yet they're paying a tax that they don't get to vote on. So that's the second thing that I have a problem with. The third and final thing is that I believe that this tax encourages bigger government and encourages wasteful spending at the municipal levels. And I think that, again, if you included the people who were paying this tax in the pool of voters who get to decide on its retention, then maybe you wouldn't see so many politicians in St. Louis City eager to give money to wealthy NFL owners for a stadium. Maybe you wouldn't be seeing streetcar projects in St. Louis and Kansas City that are extremely wasteful of taxpayer dollars. Maybe you wouldn't be seeing all kinds of other boondoggles in St. Louis and Kansas City that taxpayers revolt against, that they don't want, but their cities are imposing on them without their consent, because the majority of people, again, who pay the tax don't even live in those jurisdictions and have no say in the spending orgies that their cities are engaging in. So I would just urge you all to vote in favor of these bills. They're good public policy. They will encourage a restraint on government spending, and they will encourage fiscal responsibility in our two largest cities, our two largest economic engines of our state. Thank you.
Questions for the bill handlers? Representative Colonna.
Thank you, Mr. Farr.
Pradeep.
Colleagues, every once in a while I think to myself, boy, I'm really going to miss it down here. And every once in a while I think to myself, I cannot deal with one more hearing of disingenuous, irresponsible, talking point, lobbyists handed me this bill to run with moment. With the exception of Representative English, I don't know enough about the legal issue, and I know we got folks here tonight. They're going to talk about that and try and help me understand whether it's an issue or not. But I just heard one of my Republican colleagues, you support progressive income taxes? Your big sticking point was this is a regressive tax. So if I give you an amendment to encourage local control, like we say we want to do, that actually taxes wealthy people more, you would support that, because your biggest problem with our earnings tax is it's regressive. So if I offer an amendment on your bill to tax folks that make more money at a higher rate, we'll even do 4 or 5 levels. You can help me with the levels. You'd support that, right?
I would support eliminating the loopholes. The loopholes are the most egregious aspect of this tax.
Let's talk about these
That's what
loopholes
makes it the most regressive.
That's fine. And gentlemen, what municipalities are in your district? Or are there none? I don't know.
Baldwin, Ellisville, and Wildwood.
Do they use tips?
Ellisville has famously turned down some tips lately. Baldwin really doesn't use them. And Wildwood,
Yeah,
I'm
I-
not quite sure.
I know you're new to the job, and I would be remiss if I didn't disclose to you that, yeah, municipalities in your districts have used tips. And, well, that's kind of akin to the same type of corporate welfare that you're chastising St. Louis City for doing.
Amen.
So if I have an amendment to eliminate the usage of tips in your legislative district, you're good with that.
Again, I don't think my district really uses them. And when I was an alderman in Baldwin, I opposed them. So
I
I oppose them now.
hate to pull not just same legislator, but lawyer ding dong on you. Is that a yes or a no? I don't get it. Would you support that amendment?
I would have to talk to other folks, but I do not like
That's okay.
tips.
That's okay.
Would you be trying to kill my bill or help it out though?
Hey, I'm just trying to get to the real impetus for the bill. That's all. And, Representative Matthews, you have hotels in your district, right? A couple. They probably have those things called transient use taxes, right?
Sure.
Yeah. How many people in your district get to vote on those transient guest taxes?
You know, I've heard the argument that what you're going to, and the idea that it is akin to someone who decides to spend a night in the hotel on vacation. Six Flags is in my district, so we have people come. The decision to do that versus the decision to relocate my family or where I work are two very different decisions. But in theory, I mean, you can make your argument that they don't get to vote on that tax. That is correct.
So does that transient guest tax actually pay for police protection,
I'm not totally sure.
fire protection?
Like I said, I'm not totally sure.
Do the folks who work in St. Louis City and don't live there expect services from our police department
Certainly, if they work there.
and services from our fire department? Of course they do.
Sure.
Help me out a little bit. And I'm sure we may have some lobbyists that can do this for me, but I mean, we're the ones that make the law, all right? I can understand the frustration with an earnings tax. But how do you replace it? What I've heard here is we need to start the discussion. Regressive taxes are bad. They aren't bad. We need to talk about replacing it. But when you take the equivalent of $8.7 billion out of the state budget, before you do that, you have the answer on how to replace that $8.7 billion. When you take a third of my city's budget away that we vote on, that ironically
Some of the taxpayers get to vote on it.
That ironically
That's what illustrates.
helps keep your crime rates lower. What's the answer? I mean, have the silk stocking lobbyists and the high-powered money folks that funded our statewide referendum on this 5 years ago, have they given you the answer on how we replace this?
There's been a ton of studies on this, on how to replace that, and,
Is it a higher income tax? Is it a use tax? That's probably regressive too. Is it higher property taxes? That's kind of regressive too.
I think there are potential solutions in property taxes. There's lots of potential solutions out there.
If we have a budget of $900 million, how do I come up with $300 million?
Like I said, there are several studies out there, and I know the people in St. Louis are smart people. I know they can figure out how to replace it.
Oh, flattery will get you everywhere. But I am playing with you a bit, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but shy of saying furious. I don't get it. I simply don't get it. I don't understand. If we had a solution, if you all had a solution, or even suggestions for a solution, that starts the conversation. But if I were to come into Ellisville or Eureka and say, you know what, I'm sorry guys, what you're doing, I don't like, or maybe my high-powered lobbyist friends with lots of money don't like, I want to undo that. You know, let's take away a third of your police department, 30 of your fire department. I don't like your taxation structure. I hope I would be courteous enough to say, by the way, here's the solution.
If 60% of the people that were paying that tax were in your district, I think they would have the right to come in and have them say.
Actually, they don't, and here's why they don't. That's something that neither you or I can fix or deal with. That's one of those issues where the courts say, here are the folks who get to vote on this, and here are the folks that don't get to vote on this. And I know we do have some experts here on these issues that can enlighten us a little bit more. And I do just play a lawyer sometimes. Anyway, and again, please, this is not an assault on your character. It isn't. I know you're all good people that want to do good things. That's why you ran for office. You know, you want to help folks. But I want to get out of the weeds and out of the theory and talk about practicality and how this would affect my city and how I've never heard anything about a solution. And hopefully this explains a little bit about the bill I found the other day. The frustration that some of us feel in the urban areas, especially the city of St. Louis and Kansas City, maybe Boone County, about all the lip service we give to local control, same tax policies, until it comes to something that, well, it's not local control, it's not a same tax policy. So I applaud your courage, but it's almost downright hurtful, the way it would affect some of the folks in my city. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Brief question for the bill handlers. Can you all explain how your individual bills are different from each other?
I'm not sure. I didn't look at the other two bills to see if they're weird or not. I just filed the bill because I wanted to make sure that the cities cure the constitutional problem, just like they did in Baltimore. Whether they offer full credit for taxes paid to the other states or, you know, come up with a policy to fix it. Currently, right now, I know that Mayor Slade recognizes through his attorneys that there's an issue. They promised me that they're working on it, and that's my focus here.
Well, then we can start with Representative Dogan. You've got two bills. Can you explain how your bills are different from each other?
Sure. I believe that Representative Matthews' bill ends the tax after 2017, if I'm correct, and then mine ended after 2019, and that's 1886. Then 1887, which I filed, is an exemption for the St. Louis city earnings tax for people who do not live in St. Louis City.
Thank you. Further questions for witnesses or bill handlers? Representative LaFavor. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, I am not a simple country lawyer, not even a simple city lawyer, so I'm not exactly sure how this works. This is a genuine inquiry. As I understand it, the Hancock Amendment in our state constitution, there's portions of that require the state to pick up the tab for any local mandates. If the state forces the city to pay for a certain thing, then the state has to pick up a portion of that, the amount that they've lost. With programs, and I think Representative Dogan, you may have pointed to it with the Polsinelli deal, but then we got the geospatial thing. There are, one of the things that the cities use as an economic tool to attract folks, particularly from the Kansas City area, are local incentives. And I don't know how much we do the earnings tax offset, but I know St. Louis does it. But my point here is that if the city of Kansas City is giving some incentive through the earnings tax, and we do away with that, that's going to be a loss to the city, and therefore the state would then be on the hook for picking up that portion of the tab. And I'm not sure why that hasn't been sort of lined out, or maybe it is lined out in the fiscal note, why we've got like 4.8 million in FY19. But I'm curious your thoughts on, since Constitution is a big piece of why we're bringing this, one of the pieces of our Constitution is going to force the state to pick up an awful lot of the tab for the city's incentive programs.
Yeah, I don't think that's a foregone conclusion, and I'm not a lawyer at all. So I think that's probably left to some other decision to be made down the road. I don't know that interpreting the end of the earnings tax is the same as forcing the municipality to purchase something. So I think there's an interpretation there that lawyers would have to decide that. I don't think that would apply. I don't think we're forcing the state to make up that difference. But there could be a legal opinion on that down the road.
And I wonder sort of practically how that works, whether this passes and then the lawsuit takes effect and then puts an end to it for a certain amount of time, or do we have to wait for it to be enacted for a while before somebody files a lawsuit? How long does that then put us into a court case and then a litigation? How much does that cost us? And so that I think there are some concerns there. The vast majority, I think, of the things I wanted to bring up, first of all, was the Hancock deal, because just going through the budget process that we did together, we know that times are tight, and finding $375,000 for diapers was tricky. I can't imagine having to figure out how to pick up, another 10, 15 million for St. Louis incentives. And I can't even imagine the pressure on the cities, having never been employed by the city or elected to represent the city. I don't know what that's like to come up with the spaces in their budget, but if the city of Kansas City lost 40% of their revenue, that would be the equivalent of losing $3.6 billion for the state of Missouri. $3.6 billion buys a lot of diapers. And the tightness that would put on our city would completely, it would be devastating. And the only way that we could come back from that, and the gentleman from St. Louis City mentioned that, the only way you can come back from that is to replace it with something. And so a property tax is regressive, a use tax or a sales tax is regressive. Likely it would be some sort of property tax. So then the burden of taxation on our city is solely on property owners, and largely really wealthy property owners. And so the large business corporations are gonna, their property taxes go through the roof. The property taxes in my neck of the woods, where people already have an issue buying houses there, because there's some difficulties from time to time with schools, although there's a neighborhood school in my neck of the woods that's making that a lot better. But if you take the property taxes from where I am, and to replace the property taxes, I think we're looking at 3 or 4 times that. Oh, I got too many pages. Oh, here it is. Yeah, 3 to 4 times that, the property tax. I've already got $5,000 that I'm paying, almost $5,000 a year that I'm paying in property taxes. If I have to pay $20,000, young families like mine are not going to live in my community anymore. Whether you've got the 1% earnings tax or not, if you make it impossible for families like mine to buy and own a house, it's going to be the end of my city. And so I've got some great concerns. I'm happy to see that we're interested in carving my city out. But we are not a single engine Cessna, the state of Missouri. We have got 2 economic engines on both wings. And you take one engine out, we just end up spinning in circles. You take us both out and we go straight to the ground, clearly. But you take one out, like St. Louis, and Kansas City's engine will fly for a little bit longer, but it's going to go in a circle before it hits the ground. So I'm happy to see that we're interested in taking Kansas City out, but that doesn't solve the problems for me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hummel. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting me participate today. I just have a couple of questions for Representative Matthews and Representative Dogan, and I want to thank Representative English for stating earlier that he believes when he's in the city of St. Louis working that he does get value for his dollar. He believes that the firefighters are there to protect him and he gets police services. You gentlemen, or at least you representatives, say that is not the case. Is that the case? You feel that you don't get any services when you're in the city of St. Louis? If you were working in the city of St. Louis, you feel like you don't get any services. Isn't that what you said, gentlemen?
That's what I've heard from my residents.
That's not what you didn't say residents. You said you feel like you're not getting any services when you're in the city of St. Louis. Is that a correct statement, that you think the police and firefighters in St. Louis City do not adequately take care of you when you're there?
No, that's not what
they
I'm
wouldn't
saying.
come to your aid if
That's not what I'm saying.
Actually, gentlemen, that isn't what you said. I'm trying to get at what you're meaning by that.
That's not what I meant. What I meant to say, if I didn't say it accurately, was the people that I represent, and I've heard this complaint time and time again, who do pay the earnings tax, I pay the earnings tax, but they don't receive the same level of services as people who live in the city. They don't receive as many services because they don't live there full time.
But they do avail themselves of services in the city of St. Louis, is that correct?
They do, yes.
So back to the gentleman in St. Louis City's question. So do residents in the city of St. Louis get to vote on hotel motel taxes in your areas?
They don't, but it's
So
also.
both of you gentlemen would be willing to entertain an amendment to get rid of all of the taxes that people in the city of St. Louis do not have to pay when we bring this to the floor, right?
Well, everyone.
Anybody that goes to your districts and has to pay a tax, whether it's sales tax, whether it's a hotel motel tax, you would be in favor of an exemption for anyone there that is not being able to vote on that, correct?
The difference is that sales taxes are paid across the state. Pretty much every jurisdiction has a sales tax. Only 2 entities in the entire state have this tax.
And where do those sales taxes go? What are they used for?
They're used for city services.
Oh, city services. So when you're there in those areas and you're availing yourself of those services, it's okay to pay a tax for those services. But your residents feel like they're not being adequately serviced by the police and firefighters in St. Louis City when they're there?
They don't receive the same level of services as a resident.
Do the people that go and purchase things in your district, paying those sales tax, get the same level of service when they're there?
I mean, people are driving through communities when they pay sales taxes.
What if they're there to eat? What if they're there to work? What if I go to your district and that's where I'm working? Am I receiving the same level of services and I didn't get to vote on that tax, gentlemen?
You're not paying an earnings tax in my city.
Gentlemen, that's not what I asked you. You can't have it both ways. You can't say one thing and do something else.
We're talking about the earnings tax here.
Yes, we are, gentlemen. We're talking about a tax, which you have said, your residents are not,
on yours.
gentlemen, I didn't interrupt you, would you please? You are saying that your residents feel they are not getting adequately serviced for the money that they're spending in St. Louis City, correct?
They do not receive the same level of service.
That's right. Do you think I get the same level of service when I pay a tax in your district, gentlemen?
You do not. You do not live in my community.
Then why should I have to pay that sales tax in your community when I'm there?
Again, you pay.
Whether I'm living there or not.
You pay sales taxes everywhere you go in Missouri.
What about a use tax? What about a hotel motel tax?
Same
I didn't get to vote on that,
You
gentlemen.
get to choose where you travel, though.
That's right, and you get to choose where you work, don't you, gentlemen?
You get to choose the tax rate. You can choose.
Do you get to choose where you work, gentlemen? Gentlemen, do you get to choose where you work, yes or no? Do you get to choose where you work, yes or no?
To some extent, yes.
What do you mean, to some extent?
To some extent, you don't get to choose whether your company locates.
But you have the option to go somewhere else, do you
or
not?
another.
Do I have an option, if my work is in your district, do I have the option to not pay the taxes in your district?
No.
Thank you.
Yep.
Representative Bonner.
Inquiry, please, Mr. Chairman. Representative Matthews, Representative English, you both have indicated that you are willing to match what the Senate has done and remove Kansas City from this. Can you explain the rationale as to why this is okay for one city but not the other? Or is beyond the matter of the fact that you don't represent that city?
Well, in filing the bill, as I stated, we're talking about the Constitution. And when you get double taxed as out-of-state workers that are coming into work, either in Kansas, Kansas City or St. Louis, they're not getting to claim that earnings tax when they file their taxes at the end of the year. The Kansas City area has shown and been very open, and I appreciate they're giving the information that we've requested on a daily basis and proof that they have seen that there was a problem and they have turned around and tried to fix that problem. And speaking with the mayor, I understand they recognize that. They have yet to come up with how they're going to fix that problem. That's why I filed the bill. If we're going to double tax, which is against the Constitution, I want to eliminate the earnings tax totally to fix the problem, which of course will be devastating for the city of St. Louis and Kansas City to eliminate it, but we have to fix that problem. When we're sworn to uphold the Constitution, and I found that there was a Constitution issue, that's why I filed the bill.
Thank you, Representative. Before you answered, your solution then was that the cities would offer a tax
credit.
So that would then fix the constitutional issue in your mind.
That's correct.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Matthews, why do you support for the tax, the removing of the tax for one city but not the other?
Primarily, the Senate has basically already, as my bill is filed, the Senate has killed my bill.
Okay.
So,
It's to make some progress.
it's exactly right. like I said, we can address.
But there's
the
not like a
separate issues.
philosophical.
No, I think it's good economic policy to put more dollars in the hands of our citizens and less in the hands of our government. And so that's the whole purpose. So that, just to be totally,
I appreciate the candor. I thank you, gentlemen, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Zaire,
To Clark, please.
proceed.
Thanks. Good evening. I have a process or a practical question, and then I have another question. It looks like and this might be a City of the St. Louis question, but it looks like all these abatements are expressed as tips. Is that correct? They're rolled in, or all except for 3. But that might be a question for the city. I think we all realize that what we're trying to do here, and philosophically, but what I'd really like to do is get into where we are now. Where do we stand, and where do the cities stand as far as how much revenue is pulled in? And because I think I haven't spoken to them, but I think that they realize that their work, that this might be a problem, that you guys have filed these bills, and that you can't just shut off the money overnight. And I'd like to start hearing, asking some questions about where the money is coming from, where's it going to, who's paying it. You mentioned, well, I live in St. Charles, and I worked at East West Gateway for a while, and I had to pay that 1% earnings tax, and I didn't get anything out of it, but it is what it was, right? But I think in a practical manner, I get what you guys are trying to do, but I also think you're reasonable that you wouldn't shut it off overnight, right? Okay. And so you don't have immediate solutions, so maybe the cities would have some. Are they working on this type thing?
I think you have to ask the cities that.
Okay. Yeah, because I think we know where you guys stand, but I'd like to move on.
Right, and the 5th year is coming up this year in April, so they'll be caught with the same situation if the voters turn it down. And I'm not trying to take the voters' rights away from the city of St. Louis. I'm not trying to add St. Louis County to this. I just want to make sure those people that are paying the taxes are able to use that when they do the taxes at the end of the year.
Yeah.
In Baltimore.
You guys give us, or somebody gave us, that there's abatements. There's some people don't pay it. Some people, this, that, and the other thing.
And that's a business tool for the city to use. That's not for me to decide, but I know that if I'm paying a tax, if I'm an Illinois resident, which I'm not thankful, but if I'm an Illinois resident working in the city of St. Louis, and the city, or I'm sorry, vice versa, if I'm a city of St. Louis working in Illinois, I'm going to pay earnings tax on money that I didn't make in the city of St. Louis that I made in Illinois, which is a double taxation.
Exactly.
And that's all I'm asking for them to fix.
Understand. And I think you guys have made your points.
I also think that the answers to your questions start with some data that has been very difficult to get.
That's what I want to get into. Yeah. So maybe we can have a discussion about that with the cities tonight, or their representatives or something. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Hicks, proceed.
First off, I want to thank you guys for bringing this forward. The one reason I want to thank you for it is it's bringing some light and some attention to this situation. It's going to be a pretty tough one. I can see that already. The gentlemen, all 3 of them from St. Louis, well, one of them actually from Kansas City, but kind of stuck in the same position on this. First thing, thank you. And you guys, I think, should thank them too. And the reason I say that is because we're using this process the way it should be used. They're bringing you to the table. I see our mayor from St. Louis out here. I see the expressions on his face. I can see the disappointment, but I can also see some agreements at the same time that at least we're here talking about this. But my question comes to the fact, we've got a lot of paperwork sitting up here, and I'm not going to sit here and read through it all because I'm ADD for one, and I have to pay attention to what's going on out there. I can't do 2 things at once in this committee. It moves too quickly for me. We've pointed out some areas, the abatements and things like that, where the cities, I guess what one side is saying is that the city can actually create these funds by closing up, I guess, as we were calling them a little while ago, loopholes. how many of these loopholes do we have in the city? It may be a question later for maybe someone from the mayor or something, as I can see the opposition already, but I'm just trying to get to the bottom here a little faster than what we're doing. I think we got off track. We know what you guys are trying to do, definitely. But I think that there's some other gentlemen here that want to try to help with this at the same time. Appreciate it. This is going to be a tough one. I can see the side and I can see this side. I don't know how we're going to get to the middle here unless you can start pointing out some facts on where the money can come from. I don't want to lose fire. I don't want to lose any safety, any first responders at all. I do go down to St. Louis. I love to go to the Cardinals games, all this other stuff. But I can also see, like Mr. English was talking about, the tax side of things, paying a tax. I mean, are there people paying this tax that actually don't go down to the cities? Are they being treated fairly on this, or is this something that's just paid for people that are living in and around the city itself?
Well, today we have a lot of people working from home, and I'm certain that there are likely people working all over the state that are employed by firms that are based in St. Louis and Kansas City. They're paying earning tax. They rarely if ever set foot in the city.
Those are some of the concerns and emails that I've received just in the last couple of days. And that's what some of them are talking about is, you know what, I'm paying a tax and I don't use it. And I'm forced to pay that tax. It's not something that they can just opt out of. I know we have a vote coming up on this. How's that word going to get out?
Good question for the city manager.
Thank you.
Representative Hampton.
You have to inquire.
Proceed.
A quick question. Who's got the history of this tax here tonight? When did it start? How did it get started? Because, you know, in my 4th year in Jeff City, first time I knew there was the tax, but, you know, how did we get to this point? Why me to solve this problem? You know, I see the mayor out there from 2 major cities. They usually deal with these issues and solve these problems. And I look to the local governments to take care of this. I think they're probably qualified to handle this. And where did it start? And how did it get here? That's why I'm interested to find out as we move through these. That will help me on asking some more questions. Thank you.
Good questions for Bill Handlers?
I have an epiphany.
Briefly.
Thank you. I just realized what you guys are saying, that thousands of cities across the country do it without an earnings tax. And what you guys are not advocating to get rid of police and fire and all that kind of stuff. What you're saying is let's find a better way to do it. I have an epiphany. That's all.
Further questions for the bill handlers or further epiphanies? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Because there's only 3 tiers of fair, we'll begin with those testifying in favor. Again, 3 minutes per person, 30 minutes per side, exclusive questions. With that, anyone testifying in favor?
Oh, in favor?
Yeah. You're welcome to come up in favor.
Absolutely not, sorry. Over anxious.
They're all coming together.
You may proceed.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to be here. My name is Stephanie Lewis, and I am a citizen or resident of the city of St. Louis. I am here to represent a coalition of citizens, community leaders, and business leaders who all oppose the earnings tax in the city of St. Louis. We believe that the earnings tax directly hurts the working poor by taking money directly out of their pockets. Currently, St. Louis City residents are paying federal income tax, state income tax, state and local sales tax, and local personal property tax. The average person making $30,000 a year really can't afford an additional 1% earnings tax. For many individuals making $30,000 a year, that's $300 a year that they could use to pay for housing, transportation, school supplies, or health supplies. People should be able to pay their bills without feeling worried about how this earnings tax is affecting them. Many of our St. Louis City residents feel that this tax is a burden to them. I've spoken to many of them. And what they're saying is they don't understand why they have to pay an earnings tax. Many St. Louis City residents are saying, why are wealthy individuals in the city of St. Louis receiving abatements or able to receive loopholes? Many St. Louis residents are saying, why are large corporations receiving abatements and getting around paying the earnings tax? Yet the working population of the city of St. Louis have to carry the burden for the entire region. Many are saying that is unfair. The question that I ask is that there are over 75% of the cities in the United States that currently do not have an earnings tax. My question is, why does St. Louis still have an earnings tax? Can we not allow our city officials to look across the United States, look at best practices of other cities, and also try to figure out a way that we can eliminate this earnings tax for our residents? It is unfair, and we'd like to know why we have to continue to pay this tax. One of the things that we know is that public safety is a concern. But when there are millions of dollars that are given in abatements, millions of dollars that are given in tips, why is public safety the first thing that we look at when we have to eliminate, when we talk about eliminating the earnings tax? Our residents don't understand why that is the first thing that comes about when there's a conversation about the earnings tax. Why is there not a conversation that allows us to look at abatements every year? Why is there not a conversation that allows us to look at the millions of dollars that's spent on tips every year? Why do we always have to go first and looking at cutting our city services? And we think that that's an unfair conversation that we always have to have. What we're asking is that the city of St. Louis tell the truth to the people of St. Louis. Tell the truth about the number of abatements that are given every year. Tell the truth about the number and the amount of tips that are given every year. Tell the truth about the large number of companies that choose not to come to the city of St. Louis because of those earnings tax. Tell the truth about the number of individuals who choose not to move to the city of St. Louis because of the earnings tax. And what about all of those people who have moved out of the city of St. Louis because of the earnings tax? We're asking for a fair opportunity to, one, hear the information, have the information given to the city of St. Louis. And we're also asking for an opportunity for the people in the city of St. Louis to vote. Thank you.
Questions for the witness? Representative Hanson. Proceed.
Looking at this, getting familiar with it, says that you vote on this tax every 5 years.
Yes.
The citizens of the city of St. Louis get to vote on this tax?
Yes.
Why are they voting in favor of this tax?
Well, I think there's a very small percentage who are actually coming out to vote.
Well, it
And
seems
of
to me
that
like
small-
with your coalition and the people you're representing, you get them all fired up to get out there to vote this thing down.
That's what we're doing right now, sir.
And is this your first attempt to do this, or that was my question originally. How long has this been going on?
Well, I can't speak exactly in terms of how many years. It's my understanding that there's been an opportunity for the citizens to vote every 5 years. But I also know that the citizens have not been given the information that they need to properly vote. The citizens have
So
not
you
been
mean
given.
the citizens can't understand that if they vote for this, they're gonna pay 1% more on their earnings? Now, that's not very difficult to me. If I lived down there and I had a chance to vote, that'd be an easy vote.
Well, I don't believe, sir, that many have gone into the North St. Louis city and to the city where the lower economic individuals where this bill is impacting. I don't think that they've been given the information. I don't think that those individuals understand that the large number of abatements and the large number of tips that are being given out, they don't understand that. They've not been given that information. So people are not coming out to vote because they don't understand the full ramifications. And I think we owe it to them to help them understand so they will want to come out and vote.
Well, I see your abatement issue and you're voting on this 1%, two separate issues, really. I mean, the abatement deal and all that would go away if you just went out and voted down the tax. Tell them, hey, you want it? You live in the city, you said.
I do.
You voted no on this every time you've had a chance.
Yes, sir. Well, I would say this. I recently moved to the city, so I wasn't in the city at the time, so the last 5 years ago when it was an opportunity. My mother did, and I know that my mother voted on it, and my mother was against it, so definitely.
Okay, thank you for your information.
Further questions for the witness? Representative Howell. Proceed.
Thank you for testifying today. I had a little trouble hearing you. I think it was the other microphone you're wearing for your video performance was distorting the mic, so I apologize. Who did you say you worked for again?
I didn't say who I worked
Well, who do you work for, if you don't mind me asking?
for. Sure, I work for a marketing and advertising firm.
Okay. And your primary concern was for low-income residents making under $30,000 a year.
I didn't say that was my primary concern.
I'm not trying to think. Okay, but that was an issue that you cited,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Okay. Do you currently make under $30,000?
No, I do not.
Okay, and you chose to move into the city of St. Louis knowing that you were going to have to pay an earnings tax. Is that correct?
Well, I was raised in the city of St. Louis, and I moved back into the family home
Great.
in which I was born in, yes.
So knowing you were going to pay the 1% earnings tax.
Everybody in the city of St. Louis pays an earnings tax, so yes, I knew that you couldn't get around it, but doesn't mean I like it. Doesn't mean that the people in the city of St. Louis like it.
So what services would you cut knowing that we'd have to cut a third of our budget?
Let's start with the abatements. Let's look at that. I think it's an opportunity for us to have a conversation. I think it's an opportunity to find out why
How much are the
wealthy
abatements?
individuals, I'm sorry.
How much are the abatements?
There are tens and millions of, tens of hundreds of thousands in abatements.
Tens of hundreds of thousands. So do you know the dollar amount?
I don't have the dollar amount in front of me,
Okay, so.
but I know that I've
Give me a
seen
ballpark. Give me a
20
ballpark.
million.
20 million.
Mhm.
Okay. So we're talking about 150 million. So let's say we gave the 20 million, we fixed the abatements. So we still have $130 million. The police department budget is about a third. So let's say we could make up that $20 million revenue loss. What else would you cut to make up that $130 million?
Look at tips, we look at bonds, there are a number of different things. I mean, I'm not here to bring a solution. I am
Well,
a citizen.
wait a minute. I'm sorry, what was that?
I said I'm not here to provide you with all of those solutions.
Well, what is, so you just want to get rid of it without a way to fix the revenue stream?
No, I want to get rid of it by having a conversation and having the ability to vote no on it. And I also would like for the city to have, the city officials to have conversations with the citizens of St. Louis, to have meaningful dialogue of how we can get rid of this tax.
And when you went to make an appointment at the mayor's office to talk to him about this, when was that?
I did not.
Okay, when you went to the president of the board of aldermen and set up a meeting to talk to him, when was that?
I did not.
How about your alderman?
I did not.
So lady, when exactly has you as a citizen not been allowed to have a conversation with your elected official, as you just said, to begin a conversation?
Well, I have not.
Oh, thank you, thank you. And who are you being filmed for again with the microphone? I was curious.
To vote no on E-Tax committee.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. I hope we help put the whole thing in there. That'd be great.
Representative Colonna.
Thank you, Tim Fly.
Proceed.
Is vote no on the E-Tax committee. Is that the same one that Rex Singfeld gave $600,000 today to beat the E-Tax?
It is.
Hedging our bets. That's a beautiful thing. You answered that question. I was texting Representative Humble. I was like, what? I'm on camera. I like to look pretty. You had mentioned earlier that you were here representing a coalition of business and citizens folks. I didn't catch the name of it, the coalition that you represent. Or is it the No on E-Tax
The
thing?
non-e-tax.
Oh, okay. Answer that question too. Do you know, when was the No on E-Tax group or coalition formed? How long has it been in existence?
Well, I can tell you, I joined the committee probably about a month ago.
A month ago? Okay. Who are members of this coalition?
It's a number of individuals, citizens, business leaders who are opposed to the earnings tax.
Is that all public information? I can find that on the Secretary of State's website.
I believe so. Some of my committee members, but I believe so.
And you have public meetings where people can go and ask questions and testify or inquire.
I would imagine so.
I'm not asking the next question to be flippant. I just want to make sure I understand an apple from an orange. You had mentioned that you were employed by a PR firm. And is the PR firm the E-Tax coalition you're talking about?
No.
Okay. Is the PR firm a firm that has been hired to either work for or against the preservation of our earnings tax in St. Louis City?
The PR firm is a firm that does a lot of business all over the United States. And we are,
Go ahead. Didn't mean to cut you off.
no, we are a firm that does a lot of business all over the United States, and we are as well in support of the earnings tax.
You're supporting the earnings tax? Your employer supports the earnings tax?
Well, my boss does. He doesn't believe that we should have the earnings tax.
So the PR, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, that's why I'm rephrasing this. And I got to remind myself this isn't a courtroom all the time. That would have been as a non-responsive answer, but that's okay. So the PR firm that you work for is a PR firm that's working to rescind the earnings tax in St. Louis.
The PR firm that I work for does a lot of work across the country on a lot of different initiatives.
Okay.
I don't know that I would say our firm is working as a whole. I can say that the person that I work for is not in support of the earnings tax.
Then I would say, okay, you open the door. Who is that person? Who do you work for? Is it Rex St. Bell?
I mean, do I work for Rex? No, I don't work for Rex.
Go.
And nor does my firm work for Rex.
That's right. Galapagos? They work for Galapagos?
No, we do not. No.
Oh, I'm sorry, one of my colleagues was cat calling back there and I get distracted. So repealing the earnings tax is one of the things that your firm works on. That's fine. And is it just the St. Louis City earnings tax or is it also the Kansas City earnings tax?
St. Louis City.
Just St. Louis City. All right, thank you.
The questions to the witness. Representative Hager.
Proceed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that you had mentioned is that to start with, in terms of replacement, we got to start with the spending side. And you went through abatements and tips, and that got us to about 30 million. And then you said the next spot that we would go to is the bonds. Which are the bonds in St. Louis City that the city shouldn't pay?
I don't know that I would have an answer for that today. I would admit that I think that would require further investigation, and I believe that would be for the city officials. I am a citizen, so I don't have all those details.
You know what happens when you don't pay your bonds?
What do you mean?
Like, bring it down to like the personal level. Do you own a home or do you own property? And have you ever had a mortgage on that? Okay. So it's kind of like the same thing. So the city takes out a bond, which is basically a loan on like a large purchase, whether that's a home or a road or a big project or something like that. Then financiers, in this case, bond purchasers, or in the example I'm giving you, the bank or the mortgage holder, the bond holders, then the city needs to pay that back. And there's a credit rating. The cities and government entities call them bond ratings. You call it, your credit score, freecreditscore.com. Well, if the state of Missouri went to freecreditscore.com, we'd get a AAA. But if we stop paying our bills, just like if we stop paying our bonds, and the city of St. Louis just said, golly, we got this lady who works for a PR firm, and she's really convincing, we're just going to stop paying all of our debt. That would then impact their credit score. And the next time they went to freecreditscore.com, they would see that that bond rating is reduced from a AA plus to like a B plus or a C minus or whatever it's going to be. I mean, if you default on your debt, it starts going down pretty quick. And then the debt, the reason you like to have a high credit rating score is because it makes it less expensive when I go to buy, a car or something like that, because I've got good credit. People are like, hey, man, that guy pays his bills, and so we're going to let him buy a Ford Escape with 2% interest. It's a dynamite deal that I've got right now, but I'm still paying on it because I'm poor. But I still have to pay the payments. If I chose not to pay the payments and then I defaulted on that debt, next time I go to buy the Ford Escape, they're like, well, unfortunately, you've got the cash payment, but you can't afford that anymore. Now you've got to go to like a Chevy. And so if St. Louis stopped paying their bonds, they would go from like Ford to like Chevy. And so as we explore that idea, as you think about that, think about the impact that your idea, would have on the bond rating for a city and how much more expensive it would be for the city to get less good services.
Well, I would say that we have a lot of wonderful elected officials who can figure that out. That is not my job, and that's not why I'm here. What I am here.
You're here to film the campaign commercial. That's clear.
Well, no, that is not why I'm here.
I mean, seriously, you've got like you're mic'd up for a campaign ad. You work for a PR firm that's working for the thing. I mean, it's borderline offensive. It's like Ron Calzone status, like lobbyists.
Well, what really is offensive is that we have to pay a 1% tax when many wealthy Americans
to move to the city.
No,
I mean, we're talking about how money walks.
You
walked across the city board, the city line, and said, I want to go ahead and live there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Cross.
Briefly inquire, proceed. And you live in the city, here you're speaking out against the tax. You work for a public relations firm, okay? Listen to you talk. Number one, as a citizen, you're down here to testify, okay? I respect you for what you're doing, because many times I walk into these coffee shops and listen to somebody cuss, city council, the mayor, whatever. You know what my solution is? Get out and do something about it or shut up, okay? And I respect what you're doing. Now, I know your boss, you commented about it. He is probably against the tax, and he's probably trying to keep quiet about it. Some people, many times, feel like in business, they can vote, but in the best interest of business within the community, stay out of community affairs, but vote when the opportunity is there. And I'm sure you'll agree with me on that. They're afraid to say something for fear they're going to lose business. If they make a stand, they committed a cardinal sin. Yeah, thank you.
Further questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Further testimony in favor? Further testimony in favor?
Just getting my cell phone that left up there.
Testimony in opposition. You may proceed.
I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Sylvester James, Sly James. I'm the mayor of Kansas City, Missouri. I'm honored to be here with you. Honored to be here with my friend, Mayor of St. Louis, Francis Slay. And I can tell you, I've listened to the testimony of the electeds who offered their bills, and I've listened to the young lady who testified, and I have to tell you that a lot of the testimony was nothing more than speculation, innuendo, assumptions, and misstatements. Because of the three representatives who had offered bills, I would be willing to bet you that not a single one of them, not a single one, has ever read the Citizens Commission on Municipal Revenue report that's been out for several years. I would be willing to bet you that not a single one of them knows that in the city of Kansas City, Missouri, we have a 5-year financial plan that we submit to the city council, or through the city council, to this, to the chamber and the civic council to look at, to evaluate what we're doing as a city, so that they can give us input on how we can be more efficient. I would bet you that not a single one of them has ever watched the KC stat meeting or been to a performance review. And yet they sit and talk about how we can be more efficient when I've never seen any of them in my city. And they talk about how they want to start a conversation. I don't know, but from my perspective, if I want to start a conversation with you about something, I'm going to call you up and say, hey, can we talk about this? We have an issue that we'd like to raise. If I'm going to have a conversation with you about something important, I might even get in my car and drive up and sit in your office and talk to you, like I've done about 4 or 5 times here in this session, and like I did every year that I've been in office, because I come down and have a conversation about things that are important. I don't start a conversation by threatening 40% of my budget in a piece of legislation based on nothing more than innuendos, assumptions, and misstatements. So I'm going to try to do something that I haven't heard from the people in support of this bill or these bills. I'm going to try to talk to you about some facts. And here are some facts. This is a bill that would take away 40% of Kansas City's $540 million general fund. Okay? The earnings tax generates $230 million of that $540 million. There are 3 component parts to our budget of $1.5 billion. 1/3 of that is airport. All of the money generated by airport stays in the airport. We can't use it for streets, roads, sidewalks, street trimming, toilet flushing, sewers, or anything else. Another 1/3 is water. The water department generates its bills, uses the money in order to continue on a 25-year unfunded federal mandate on overflow control that we will spend about $4 billion on. None of that money can be used for anything else. What is left to us is the general fund. General fund is $540 million. Of the general fund, 74% is spent on public safety. 74% of our general fund is spent on public safety. And the public safety I'm talking about is police, fire, and ambulance. The police department's budget is about $228 million. And we talk about cities and states that have control of their police departments and don't have this tax. Well, let me tell you, from the only city in the entire country that does not have control of its police department and is mandated by the laws passed by the legislature of the state of Missouri to give at least 20% of our general fund to the police department, I don't think we're necessarily similarly situated. We are different. There's another thing I will tell you. You wanted to know how this started? In Kansas City in 1963, there were problems with the way the city was being run. There were people who were upset about the government. There was graft. There were some issues, and the city was falling apart. Infrastructure was not being taken care of. The mayor at that time, Ilis Davis, convened a group of citizens who met for an extended period of time. And over that period of time, they looked at every possibility to increase revenues based on the laws of the state of Missouri and based on the circumstances in which they found themselves. The only way that they could increase revenues was with this earnings tax. They passed a 0.5% earnings tax. That 0.5% earnings tax did well and stayed in place until 1970. In 1968, Martin Luther King and a whole bunch of other people were killed, and there were riots. You might remember those. And after that, there was murder in the street, and the crime rate in Kansas City and the homicide rate shot up, and it's remained there ever since. So the citizens once again convened because they felt they needed increased police protection. So they raised the 0.5% earnings tax to 1% earnings tax, and it's been there ever since. And then in 2010, Rex Sinquefield put together an initiative petition statewide, so that people who don't live in Kansas City could vote on whether or not Kansas City could tax itself. So, you talk about taxation without representation. How about representation without having any taxation? Okay, so all the people in the state of Missouri got to vote on what Kansas City, Missouri, and St. Louis could and could not do. Boy, that's like shooting fish in a barrel. All you got to do is walk up and say, like they do on their commercials for vote no on the earnings tax, what would you do with $500? Well, I'd start a business. Well, if you got $500 on the earnings tax, that means you're making $50,000. And if you need $500 to start a business, something's going drastically wrong. Okay? So here's the deal. This tax is something that the citizens of Kansas City passed the last time by 78%. They knew what they were doing. They're not stupid. And to talk about people coming into the city, every working day, the population of Kansas City increases by 1/3. Every single working day. Now, let's assume that it takes 500, well, give you an easy number. Let's assume that it takes 600 tire tracks over a stretch of road to create a pothole. 400 of those tire tracks are by Kansas City residents, and 200 of them are by people who don't live there. But only people who should have to pay to fix the tire tracks and the potholes are the ones that live there. The people who come to work in Kansas City every day come there, they use the water, they flush the toilets, they leave trash behind, they call the police when they have an accident or they have a problem, they get in the ambulances when they are sick or need to go to the hospital. They eat at the restaurants that we pay our codes inspectors to inspect. Everything that they do in Kansas City, the people of Kansas City pay for. They come to the stadiums out in Jackson County and they don't pay any extra for that. They go to the plaza and they buy stuff there. They don't pay any extra for that. They take advantage of the Kauffman Center for Performing Arts. They don't pay anything extra for that. But they come and they come and they come. And this concept that businesses move out, I'm sorry, businesses are moving in. Our population is growing. Our businesses are growing. Our Chamber of Commerce, our Civic Council, our business leaders are here. And in order to prove it, we had the hearing in the Senate, and we had 35 people show up for that at 8:30 in the morning when nobody thought we would show up. And they all showed up and they all said the same thing. Leave us alone. Let us have our earnings tax so that we can have the standard of living that we have and that we need to keep this city working. Now, the facts are very simple. 50% of the earnings tax is paid by people who don't live there. But those people work there. And when you're talking about what do they get out of it, they get a job. Because if we don't have the earnings tax and things go to hell in a handbasket in Kansas City, there won't be many jobs, and then they'll have to go find someplace else. One thing we do know, every suburb is a suburb of somewhere. And in our case, we're the somewhere. We're the hub around which all these folks migrate. We're the ones that provide the amenities, the services, and the assets that the entire region takes advantage of. And we don't charge them an extra buck on their tickets. We don't give them an extra 5 cents on their taxes for gas. We don't charge them more money. I've heard people say this is a regressive tax. I think they ought to look up the term regressive. In the first place, this is a tax that is paid by people who earn. Now, there are people who do not earn that pay sales taxes every time that they go to buy something in a grocery store. This is a tax that retirees do not pay. There are retirees, every time they go buy something, they pay sales tax. If they have a house, they pay property tax. If we lose the earnings tax, we would have to increase property taxes by 4 times and sales taxes by 3 times in order to make up a portion of the earnings tax we lost. And here's the interesting part. We don't have the authority to do any of that under the state of Missouri's current tax scheme and laws. So I've been down here and I've talked to senators, I've talked to representatives, I've talked to people, and not a single person has offered a single solution for this. And I guess they think that the people that run the cities and are there and deal with our residents every single day, where we're held accountable every single day, that we haven't thought about this. So let me tell you what I did to make sure that I did think about it. 2011, first thing I did after I was elected, I reconstituted the Citizens Commission on Municipal Revenue. They met for 13 months. You can find the report. It's on my website. It's been there since 2012. It says all the stuff that I'm about to tell you. And that is, they went out and they compared us to comparable cities. And what they found is that we're pretty darn good compared to a lot of cities. A lot of cities have sky-high property taxes, i.e. Kansas. A lot of cities have sky-high sales taxes. A lot of cities make up the difference with fees that they can charge that we can't charge. A lot of cities have a lot of different ways of making money. We do not. And those people worked for 13 months, and they came back with a report, and they spread out how our tax base relates to others and how we are able to continue to do what we need to do by keeping just what we've got. We're not asking for more. I'm not down here asking you to give us a penny. I'm not asking you for any money. I'm asking you to let us do what you said we were able to do when this thing came up for a vote in 2010. And what I heard then was, let the local residents decide. Well, the local residents did decide in 2011 by 78% that this was a tax that we wanted. And now here we are again with the legislature telling us we don't care what the local residents want. We want to repeal the tax. So let's talk about the other thing that was raised, constitutionality. This isn't unconstitutional. The issue in Baltimore was that there was a disparity, a discrimination between two taxpayers similarly situated because one worked in a different place than the other. That's not a problem in Kansas City. It doesn't exist. We have all sorts of credits. Everything's kosher. There is nothing. And I've got a legal opinion from Hush Blackwell to prove it, unlike anybody that I've seen here who has a legal opinion that says that I'm wrong. So I had hoped that the legislature would be solving problems, but what I'm hearing is that you want to create one. And not a single person in this legislature, either on the Senate or the House side, has offered a single solitary solution for how we replace $230 million of our $540 million general fund when 74% of that general fund is spent on police, fire, and ambulance. So if it runs out on the way that it's supposed to and is voted down as a 10-year sunset, then every year we will lay off 80 police officers, 50 firefighters, and 122 city workers, because that's the only way that we can match personnel and revenue together. And at the end of that 10 years, we will have reduced our fire department by 500, our police department by 800, and our city workers by 1,222.
Mayor, I really appreciate your testimony. I told everybody I was going to keep testimony limited to 3 minutes.
All right, I'm done.
I've been as lean as possible. I'm
Well, I'm not done. I could go on for a couple hours.
I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions for you, but if we could get the questions, I would appreciate it.
All right.
We will start with Representative Cross.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I don't live in Kansas City, as you know. My dad operated a family business in Lee Summit. We're a small town. In fact, you could probably classify us as a small, minimal-sized town compared to the size of Kansas City. My dad had a business and had to pay a 1% paycheck for his employees to KCMO. We have employees that live in the city where an employer in eastern Jackson County has to pay an earnings tax to KCMO. We didn't have a chance to vote on it. Is that fair?
Yes.
How?
Well, I'll be happy to tell you. First of all, I'm a little confused. If your business is located in Lee Summit,
Yes, sir.
then and their employees are working in Lee Summit?
That's correct, because they're residents of KCMO.
Okay, so they live in Kansas City.
That's very correct, sir.
So they made a choice to live in Kansas City.
But the
and work.
employer has to pay the
I'm
tax.
sorry, sir, if you let me finish, I'm trying to answer your question. All right? They made a choice to live in Kansas City. And so they know that they're paying the earnings tax.
But the employer has to pay it?
Well, the employer takes it out. The employer doesn't pay it. The employer takes it out of their check.
That's very correct, sir.
So the employer's not paying it. The employee is paying it.
But the city can't say, are they gonna pay for the office help to deduct the taxes, to pay the bills?
Seriously, it's going to take an employee to take 1% out of people's checks.
It's part of the experience of doing business, sir.
All right.
Small business is my point.
All right.
And that's just an example of a small business. There's other businesses out in the other area, whether it's Blue Springs, Lee Summit, Oak Grove, where their employees probably would reside in Kansas City. They've got to deduct from their checks to pay Kansas City for something that they didn't have any chance to vote on.
And what's really interesting is that we have support from all of those chambers and people in those surrounding areas to keep the earnings tax, because they know something. And they know that if Kansas City takes it on the chin, they're going down too. It's just that simple, because we are the middle of the whole thing here. They sell goods and services to the people of Kansas City. They need Kansas City in order to make their businesses thrive and grow. They have people that they need to come to work, and they have to get them from Kansas City. The bottom line is, sir, that they are in favor of keeping the earnings tax. And I'm always going to be able to find a business or 2 or 10 that aren't going to like it. But I will tell you what, I will match the ones that I can find that do like it and will pay it and will support it against those who don't anytime, because they understand the value.
Jackson County businesses are not worried about paying an earnings tax or deducting an earnings tax for the employees. I can assure you that.
Okay.
I've heard more than one complaint about it. Naturally, there's nothing I can do about it.
Well, I can tell you, sir, I hear more than one complaint about just about everything, but I can also tell you that I'm very much aware of the fact that most of the time, only those who have complaints say anything. Those who do not have complaints are generally pretty quiet. Thus, we coined the phrase, the silent majority.
Would you accept somebody making minimum wage? Would you consider that?
No, because if we start doing that, we start making exemptions across the board. And the exemption that we've made is retirees don't pay it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Bonden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To inquire. Proceed. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Thank
Good
you
evening.
for coming down. You mentioned that 74% of the general fund is spent on public safety.
Correct.
Can you tell us what the other 26% is spent on?
Street maintenance.
Street maintenance?
Street maintenance is certainly one big part of it. Sidewalks. Every other thing that we do that isn't public safety comes out of the other 26%. Every other thing.
Okay, and so street maintenance is part of it, but maybe a few other things?
Oh, absolutely.
There's
Think about everything that we do as a city that's not public safety.
That's what I'm trying to flesh out.
Sure.
There's gotta
Street
be a lot.
maintenance, tree trimming, the parks and recs. Let's see, I'm looking through the departments. The HR, Public Works Department, every other department other than police and fire and ambulance gets paid out of the other 24%. And I believe there's 18 separate departments. So HRD, housing, everything comes out of that 26%.
Thank you. Maybe I'm the new guy, but it helps me flesh these issues out. Just
No
so we
worries.
know. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next question that I have, and you touched on this briefly, was the decision in Baltimore regarding the constitutionality. Representative English has brought this up as well. Can you explain to me, who is certainly not the either of the lawyers on this committee, what is I understand the constitutional argument, but why we're different from that?
Well, absolutely. In Baltimore, the issue was two similarly situated workers living in Baltimore. One worked outside the state, one worked inside. And they were taxed differently. And there was no credits being given in order to even that out. So there we had a disparity, and it was about the silent commerce clause, okay? So once they had that disparity, then you had a constitutional issue because one was taxed differently than the other when the circumstances were really essentially the same. We've done that. We took care of that a long time ago. It was stated that we took care of that. We never had that problem because we have a series of credits that give you credit that even it out so that every taxpayer in the city is taken care of and taxed on the same basis equally. So if you deserve a credit for working someplace else, you get that credit against your taxes, or you can even get a direct refund if it's absolutely paid. So we don't have that problem. There is no disparity. There is no discrimination between taxpayers. It's even.
Okay. I'm sorry. I do not understand you.
Most people don't. I'm not sure that I can tell you either unless you just love wallowing around in tax stuff.
No, I don't, but I think that's why we're here.
Yeah, I got you. I got you.
So there's two workers that live in similarly.
There are two similarly situated workers that live in Baltimore.
Okay.
Let's say they live side by side.
Could you maybe use a Kansas City analogy? It would help.
All right. There's two similarly situated Kansas City workers live next door to each other.
Okay.
One works in Kansas City and lives in Kansas City. One lives in Kansas City and works in Johnson County. Okay. So the one that works in Kansas City and lives in Kansas City pays their 1% earnings tax based on their earnings. The one next door lives in Kansas City, but they pay less because they're not paying on their earnings. Their earnings are outside. So we give the one that lives next door credit to even that out so that everybody's paying the same.
I've got you now, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Well, you know what? Don't hold me to any of it. I'm a lawyer, but I like to sue people, not explain taxes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative there.
Good evening, Mayor. How are
Good
you?
evening. I'm great. How are you?
Splendid.
Good. Glad to hear.
A couple questions. The rate of growth, I'm just sitting here, if you guys are happy with your tax.
Yes.
Your earnings tax, you take in more as your economy grows.
Yes.
Correct? Okay. I'm wondering why the Senate, how you convinced the Senate to carve you out.
I didn't. I never asked them to. Never said a word to him about carving us out. Every time I went and talked to somebody in the Senate, I said that neither Kansas City nor St. Louis should be in this. This is a local control issue. We had a vote in 2010 saying it was going to be left to the local voters to do it. And now here you are. I think it's a political and legislative bait and switch, and you ought to leave St. Louis and Kansas City alone, because we are the two big engines in this state in terms of producing economic activity. We produce the most jobs, we produce the most goods, we produce the most revenue. Why are you jacking with us when you don't need to? We already had this argument in 2010, and now here you are, because of some political agenda, starting it over again on a different basis.
Do you use any of your earnings tax, or do you use abatements?
Abatements, this is another thing. I don't know how people are talking about abatements, but abatements, the way that we use them, are property tax abatements. And a property tax abatement means that if you come and buy a piece of property, and on that property there's $1 tax, and you say, I want to improve that property and make it something better than it is. And then after you improve the property, the tax rises to $3. The abatement simply means that you don't have to pay the other $2, you only pay the $1. And the reason for that is so that you can get a return on your investment and have the money to improve the property. And then over a period of time, whether it's 10 years or 15 years or whatever, that abatement rolls off and you're back up to whatever the property value is. That's an abatement.
Your earnings tax as
Abatements are, earnings taxes aren't abated. Property taxes are abated, at least in Kansas City.
Okay. You mentioned that.
Oh, and there's another thing too, because TIF came into it.
Yeah.
TIF, tax increment financing. Only the increment is at play here. And if there's no project, then there is no increment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like somebody walks into a bank and says, oh, let's take the money out of the box that says school district or library and use that. It doesn't exist. The taxes that were being paid will be paid if the project doesn't happen. The only thing that happens is if a project does happen, the increment is often used to pay for the infrastructure needs to build the project and other things like that. So a lot of misinformation, misunderstanding, and misuse of terms.
Gotcha. So in Kansas City, I understand, I hear you. In Kansas City, though, you don't use it as an incentive.
TIF is an incentive.
No, not TIF, the earnings.
We use TIF as an incentive.
Gotcha. Okay. And you mentioned that 50% of your folks work in Kansas City. 50% of the earnings tax paid,
right?
The folks live outside.
Yes.
Okay.
30% comes from Kansas.
Okay. All right. And do you know? And you really have your figures, and I appreciate that. Do you know how many? How much of the earnings tax is paid by individuals and how much by businesses?
I don't have that information, but I can tell you this: Representative Parr has sent us a number of FOIA requests, and I think we've responded to every single one. So he should have that information, or may have that information. I don't have it with me.
Might be holding out on us.
Well, I wouldn't say that. He looks like a semi-honest guy.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor, very much. Appreciate it.
I'll recognize Representative Cohen in a second, but I would like to say I have done several freedom of information requests, and your city has been extraordinarily forthcoming in those, and I appreciate how responsive you've been.
No problem, sir.
Representative Colonna.
Thank you, Jim Clark.
Proceed.
Mr. Mayor, I have never seen you testify before. Let me tell you, if I was a resident of Kansas City, Missouri, you'd have my vote.
Thank you. Fortunately, I've had their vote, and I appreciate that very much. I'm honored to be their mayor. Honored.
I wanted to follow up just a little bit on Representative Zayer's inquiry.
Sure.
Terminology is important, and you know, we both sides of the state have economic development tools at our disposal to help create jobs.
Yes.
Or retain jobs. And I think what Representative Zayer was getting at is and Mayor Slater, correct me if I'm wrong, I think sometimes in the city of St. Louis, we have used not abatement, but say earnings tax forgiveness or abatement. Head shaking, no. Forgiveness? It's shaking, no, okay. Tell you what, Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna let this be, and, I will let you explain, come on and explain. And I'll tell you where this is coming from. You know, the Post-Dispatch, some press organizations, probably some PR firms hired by folks that, you know, no one needs tax, which I assume the 600 grand is gonna be spent against you and us.
Oh, absolutely. They've already started running commercials on the radio. That's very interesting. They only run the commercials on the black stations, which I think is kind of interesting. They're not running on country and western stations, but they are on hip hop and religious stations that are listened to by predominantly black people. And I just think that's kind of interesting. Wow. It's just me.
On that note, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your testimony. I truly appreciate it.
My pleasure, sir.
Further questions for the witness? I've got a few final questions.
Yes, sir.
Just from some of the discussion we've had today. I know you talked about the comptroller versus Wing case, and you've got an opinion from Hush Blackwell, and I've seen more than one legal opinion floating around. I know that I've seen at least some saying that you guys are following what the Supreme Court laid down. Some say you might be outside of it. My question is, my understanding is currently nobody's filed a lawsuit against Kansas City. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Okay, let's say hypothetically they do. And I know we're in a hypothetical world, but let's say hypothetically they do. If that happens, if that lawsuit goes to court, and if that lawsuit is successful, has the city of Kansas City prepared for something like that to occur?
The lawsuit itself or the results of the lawsuit?
The results of the lawsuit.
There is nothing that we can do to prepare. And the reason that nobody down here has a solution is because there isn't one. There is nobody.
But I guess my concern is that is that the answer that I mean, is that the answer that you have? Is that no? If the court steps in and says we under Comptroller versus Wayne are violating the Dormant Commerce Clause, well then we're just done. We should just fold up shop. Is that the answer?
No, the answer isn't that we'll fold up shop. The answer is we'll lay off a whole ton of people and try and reach the budget. Then we get into a different loop because our pension benefits need to still be paid at the same rate level. The problem is we won't have an employee base that will feed into the pension, and sooner or later we'll get upside down and we'll be facing civic bankruptcy, i.e. Detroit. Here's the bottom line. Nobody who's brought up any of these bills has offered a single solitary solution. They haven't said, hey, we'll pay. They haven't said we'll raise the limits on sales tax or property tax, and you can do all of that. Now you talk about regressive, raising the rates of sales tax and property tax, that's regressive. Now, there's nobody who has offered a single solitary solution. And believe me, we've looked, we're not stupid. That's exactly why I appointed the Citizens Commission on Municipal Revenue. What do we do if this happens? They said, we don't have any idea. You can't raise fees. You can't raise sales tax. You can't raise property tax. So I'll ask you guys, if we can't raise any taxes, which by the way would have to be voted on by a whole bunch of people a whole bunch of times, which if they have to replace $230 million simply by Kansas City people, why would they vote to tax themselves to the highest extent so that they can replace the 50% they don't have to pay? They'll never pass it. And there's nobody who's offered any single solitary concept of how we deal with $230 million missing in our budget. And you know why? Because there ain't one.
And I appreciate what you're saying, but I guess as I see it, there are three issues the earnings tax is facing. One, it has to be renewed this year. Two, there's a legislative movement to repeal it. And three, there's the possibility, however, be it small, that you may see, of litigation. In two of those three situations, I believe that the earnings tax is drawn down. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, that the earnings tax is what?
Is drawn down over a period of time. Let's say hypothetically the voters choose not to renew it this year. It goes down over a period of time, or does it stop immediately?
10 years.
Okay, so it goes down over 10 years. And I think in the legislative proposals, it's drawn down over 2 years or 3 years, whatever it be.
Right.
If the court steps in, though, there's no drawdown period. It just stops.
Court hasn't stepped in, and the court can make rules the court could just as easily say, we're going to cut this off, but we're going to give you time to phase it out. And there's nothing that would prevent that.
And that's all I'm trying to figure out, is because I understand you're saying that nobody's proposing a solution, but as you and I both know, the courts can be very cold about this. And so I just want to know if the city of Kansas City had prepared for that contingency, and if so, what that contingency plan was.
I think I pretty much said there is no contingency for losing 40% of our general fund, which supplies 74% of the money to public safety. There is no solution to that, whether it's right now, 2 years from now, or 10 years from now. We have no ability to make up those funds.
And while I appreciate that, I think the emotional argument works better with the group here. I do have some concern in a court of law that that argument would carry as much sway because it's more of a constitutional issue as opposed to what's best for the city.
There is no emotional argument that we would make with the court. That's not what, we're not in a courtroom. And when we're in a courtroom, what we'll do is we'll have our lawyers make legal arguments that say that we are constitutionally firm. And as of this moment, nobody has said anything to the contrary. I was in the Senate meeting with the, or hearing with the lawyer that came in, who, by the way, I thought was unethical, considering the fact that his firm is employed by the city of Kansas City, and he is coming in as a paid expert for on an issue against the city. So I'm kind of seeing these kind of duplicitous type things going on around this, and it drives me a little crazy. But he came in, and he was so wrong on his facts that he couldn't even support them. So the bottom line is, 3 lawyers can come up with 3 different answers to the same question, and they can all be worthy of going to a lawsuit. Lawsuits don't scare me, but just because you file it doesn't mean you're going to win. We're firm. We've read the opinions. Our lawyers have read the opinions. We've had a whole bevy of lawyers read the opinion, and they say that based on our scheme, we're on solid ground. So if somebody wants to come and sue, that's cool.
And while I appreciate that, I just wanted to see if you all had a plan in place, and it appears that you're confident enough in your position that you see no reason or no ability to make such a plan for that contingency.
I want to be clear, sir. There's always a reason to make a plan. But here's the thing where I will repeat again. We have no ability to cover a $230 million loss. If I had the ability to do that, if we had the ability to do that, we wouldn't be sitting here. We would have already have done it. But we don't have the ability. So it's not a matter of will. It's a matter of ability. And we have no ability. Now, if this legislature wants to give us the ability to come up with a different way to raise that money, we'll be happy to have that conversation. And notice, I didn't file a piece of legislation to make that statement and to offer that conversation.
Second question, I'd like to go back to Representative Cross's point earlier. He asked you whether or not you would be willing to exempt out those making minimum wage, and you said you would not. Is that correct?
No, because I don't think that we have the ability to do that. Now you want to put me in a situation where we're unconstitutional, okay? And here's why. When everybody was saying, gee, you know, the earnings tax keeps businesses from coming to the city, I said, I'd like to test that theory. And they said, how? I said, I'd like to carve out the West Bottoms and make it an earnings tax-free zone and see how many businesses move there in the next 5 years. So I had a legal opinion drafted up by the law department. They said, you can't do that. You can't accept specific groups of people like that unless there's a rational basis like retirees, living on fixed incomes, that type of thing. That's okay. But we could not do any of the other things because of the Equal Protection Clause. So if we're saying that all those who earn have to pay 1%, even if you're earning a little, you still pay the 1%. If you're retirees, you're not earning. There's a distinction.
Then I want to go back. You said earlier, and maybe I'm wrong about this, so correct me if I'm, you said you exempt out retirees.
Yes.
How are they exempted if they don't earn?
They're exempted because they don't earn.
So you didn't put any special exemption in there. You're just saying because they're retired and they're not working a job, they don't pay anything.
Well, we could have just as easily, I imagine, say that you pay 1% on your retirement benefits, but we have limited this to earnings and profits, and they don't have earnings and they don't have profits. So they are not in the category that can be taxed.
This is not a special Kansas City exemption that the council passed or anything like that. You're just saying they don't fall under the earnings tax.
Well, I don't know what happens elsewhere. I spend most of my time concentrated on my city and try to keep my nose out of other people. So I don't know whether it's the same across the board.
That's what you said when Representative Cross was asking you about exempting minimum wage earners. You said the only group we exempt is retirees. So
That's
I'm just
exactly
trying to
right.
clarify, is there actually an exemption, or are you just saying they don't even qualify for the tax?
They don't qualify, but they are specifically said that they do not pay. So I guess you can call that an exemption or a disqualification. And the fact of the matter is they don't pay it.
Where did that come from? Was that something
That I
the
can't
council?
tell you. I can't tell you. I don't.
Is there anybody in the city that can tell me that?
Well, I'm sure that there is, probably legal.
Is there somebody here tonight that could they can answer that?
I don't think so. I don't believe so.
Okay, next question. And I think what Representative Cross's point was is that, you know, if you're somebody who makes minimum wage, if you make $7.50 or $8 an hour and you work 40 hours a week, you don't earn a tremendous amount of money. But the question, and I think what he was driving at is, why is it that there is no base income exemption? Why is it that the tax starts from $1?
The definition of earnings is the same whether it's a little or a lot. And we can solve the problem about low wage workers by the state simply raising the minimum wage, which they've been asked to do time and time again. So if you're concerned about the people who are making so little, then give them more money that they can earn, because we certainly tried to do that in Kansas City and you guys kind of slapped us down on it. So if you're concerned about minimum wage workers, raise the minimum wage.
But you would agree that those same workers would benefit if they didn't have to pay, you know, just like a progressive income tax where the first period of income is exempted, they would get that same benefit in Kansas City, correct?
You know what? Everybody would benefit if they never had to pay a penny of tax, but at the end of the day, they wouldn't have any place to go to spend money anyhow.
Right.
Nothing would exist.
But earlier we were discussing whether or not it was a regressive tax. A regressive tax is a tax that impacts poor people to a greater extent than it impacts those who are wealthy, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so I guess what I'm saying is why is it that Kansas City has never considered making this a more progressive tax?
Tell me how we would do that, sir.
If you exempted the first 5,000 income or 10,000 income for residents.
And I would submit to you that that is exactly the type of situation that would create more problems than it would solve. It is very simple. If you live and work or work in Kansas City, you pay 1% of your earnings or 1% of your profits. If you don't make a lot of money, then you're not paying a lot. Does it matter?
It impacts you more.
Oh, of course it does. I mean, if you go onto a bus and there's a rich guy there and a poor guy, and you say, give me all you got, the rich guy can give you all you got and he can go to the bank and get more. The poor guy can't. So I understand that. But the fact of the matter is that we still have to make some level of fairness across the board. So you want to set up different tiers, and I would submit to you, if we came in with different tiers, then you would be complaining about that and bills would be filed about that. This is very simple. Everybody understands the game. And one more thing, 78% of the people in Kansas City, rich and poor, voted to maintain this tax. 78%. And I would submit to you that not all of that 78% of those voters were high income earners. And I will also tell you that I worked very closely with the people who were out trying to get the minimum wage earned for the last year. And they weren't complaining about the earnings tax. They were complaining about not being paid a living wage, and that the fact that they came to us because the state wouldn't do anything about it.
You would agree whether or not their income went up as paid, or they got to keep more of their tax money. Either way, it's a benefit to them, correct?
Well, absolutely. But as you said, the poorer you are, the more the detriment. So if you want to decrease the detriment to them, raise their minimum wage.
Or exempt.
Or let us do it.
Or exempt those under the poverty level from paying the earnings tax.
Well, wait a minute. So now we're going to exempt them under the poverty level. You have to be working first, okay? So it's not just a matter of doing the poverty level.
You can work
it's low wage workers
as well.
I know, but there's a lot of people under the poverty level that aren't working. They don't pay it either.
Sure.
Okay.
But I guess what I'm trying to focus on is why is it that Kansas City has never ever considered exempting those that first level of income to protect those that earn the least, and therefore if you earn $16,000 or $20,000 a year, why is it that those people don't have some sort of exempted income because of how little they earn and how significantly that impacts them?
Well, first of all, let me correct something you said. Why is it that Kansas City has never ever considered it? What makes you think we haven't?
I'm asking if you have.
Well, that wasn't what you said, but if you're asking if we have, yes, we've considered it, and we've decided that it is such a weird deal that we would create more problems than we could possibly solve. Because now we start creating tiers
like the
on a
state has,
1%
like the
tax.
federal government has. Like the state government does and like the federal government does. You'd agree all the other income taxes they pay are progressive taxes. State income tax is progressive, the federal income tax is progressive, correct?
And you still charge people who make little money taxes, right?
It's a lower amount. In fact,
we're charging a lower amount too.
But no, you're charged 1% across the board.
What's the lowest tax rate in the state of Missouri?
I think it starts at 0%.
Okay.
The 0 for the first amount, and then it goes to 1%, then it goes to 2%, and the top tax rate is 6%. But it starts at 0 because it's a progressive tax rate.
We cannot do that with the earnings tax and maintain and avoid the issues of unconstitutionality. It's a different tax. And that's exactly what they talked about in Baltimore. We have similarly situated workers.
It's your testimony today that you believe that if you institute a progressive earnings tax, that would be unconstitutional.
I'm giving you the opinion of a non-tax lawyer on a subject that I haven't studied up on in the last 6 weeks.
From one non-tax lawyer to another. I appreciate that.
There you go.
I'm just trying to flesh out this issue because I think that's what the point that Representative Cross was trying to get to is the extent of how this impacts the working poor.
Well, and I'll say this, I will agree with you, it impacts the working poor. So one of the things that we ought to be thinking about is how do we decrease the number of the working poor? Now that's something this legislature could easily do something about if they wanted to, but I don't see any bills up here talking about that.
And I think it's fair to say that you all could have that same impact if you were to exempt the initial portions of income from the earnings tax.
We tried to take a different approach. We tried to actually put more money in their pockets by raising their minimum wage to $13 per hour over a period of time, and you guys told us we couldn't. So we tried to do something about it. We just took a different approach, and you said we couldn't do it. So, I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't tell me that you're up here trying to protect the poor, and then when we try to protect the poor, you tell us we can't do it.
Yeah, and I think your testimony today is that you try to help them one way, but you won't consider the other way.
I'm saying that we have constitutional issues with doing it the other way.
Okay. And I think we can agree to disagree, but again, neither of us are tax lawyers.
Neither one of us are tax lawyers, and neither one of us have taken a tax exam recently.
Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for coming to testify.
Any others? Thank you.
Further testimony in opposition.
That's you, brother.
Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I do have some prepared remarks here, but I did want to, first of all, address some things that I've heard some people say to try to clarify, I think, and correct some things. You know, first and foremost, there are no huge loopholes. There are no exemptions from the earnings tax that we heard talk about. There's nobody that's earning that we know about that's earning. Has earnings in the city of St. Louis that they're not paying earnings tax. What we do is, like the state does and a lot of other municipalities and places all over the region, there is tax increment financing. And when we have tax increment financing, there is a abatement on, or the tax increment portion where you have 50% of the taxes paid, property taxes, earnings taxes, and sales taxes. A certain portion of that goes into financing the development. So earnings taxes is part of that. That's something we get the authority from the state with. We have super, we also have some super TIFs that the state participates in. I know that there's just around the city of St. Louis area, in St. Louis County, we have Ellisville, Baldwin, Eureka, Benton, Valley Park, Clayton, Maryland Heights, Bridgeton, a lot of other cities as well that have tax increment financing, and they do that. So that's not an unusual thing. But in those cities that have the earnings tax, my understanding is the earnings tax is part of the tax increment financing. There are only a few places where we've had situations where we've given someone in the nature of a TIF a rebate on the growth. And by the way, on tax increment financing, as you know, it's just the percentage of the growth in taxes. So they don't get, if there's a 50%, you get 50% of the taxes go back into development. That's 50% of the growth in taxes. So it's the same thing with what we do with the earnings tax. We do have situations where we will, and I think there's maybe a total of 5 individual companies that we have, and we're sending the information. I know you've given us the request. But what happens there is that if a business decides to stay in the city of St. Louis, what we'll do is give them a rebate on a 50% rebate on the growth in their earnings taxes. So we're not losing anything. We're not giving them anything we were getting. What we'll do is we'll do a 50% rebate on the growth of their earnings tax, and it goes back into funding maybe the build out or maybe improvements to their facility or an expansion or whatever it is we're trying to do. So that is not an unusual tax incentive, but we are not forgiving the earnings taxes. Nobody's exempt from the earnings taxes, and there is no huge loopholes like we heard talked about before, and I think that's unfortunate that we're getting that inaccurate information, and that's kind of what we've been dealing with all along when this issue comes up, unfortunately. You know, we've already, the city of St. Louis has already dealt with and addressed the issue, and I'll drop this off with you on the credits. We looked at that issue. We thought, you know, we might have an issue there, so we actually corrected that a month ago. And so anybody that lives in the city of St. Louis, works outside in another state, and is paying taxes gets a credit on that. And so here's a verification from our collector of revenue, which is a separately elected office in the city of St. Louis, which I'll drop off with my form that I have. The other thing is that we have, you know, we hear about people paying taxes without voting on them. All of us do that, wherever we go. When you buy something, you go to some other city, you're paying the sales taxes that somebody else voted on. You're in a business in a community, whether or not you live there, you still pay the property taxes, you pay the business taxes, and you don't have an opportunity to vote on it. So, I mean, this is not an unusual thing to go on where people actually pay taxes, businesses pay taxes that they don't have an opportunity to vote on. Now, whether it's right or wrong, it's something that happens all over the place. It's not unusual. And by the way, everybody who pays the earnings tax benefits, and I think Mayor James did a great job of explaining that, benefits by the taxes that they're paying. Direct benefits, whether they're using the roads, public safety, all the things, the electric signals and courts in case something comes up. So they really have an opportunity to take advantage of and benefit from the tax. There are thousands of cities across America that have the earnings taxes, and they range from 1% to 4%. Ours is a 1% tax, and there are many major cities like Kansas City, of course, New York, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, and Louisville. But we're on the lower end. We are at the 1% level. And, you know, employers who exist outside the city of St. Louis, and where somebody works in that employer and pays the earnings tax, the person pays the earnings tax, that employer is not required, I know in the city of St. Louis, to withhold those taxes. That employer is not required to. So if it's costing them money and they don't want to do it, but the individual still has to file a earnings tax return with our collective revenues office. So I just want to clarify those things. But, you know, and I've said this before, well, I'll say that our earnings tax comes to about $164 million. We have a $492 million general operating budget, so it's about a third of our general operating budget. And our public safety budget is about 65% of that. I've said this before, and I'll say it again, that I agree with the contention that the city's earnings tax, a 1% local tax levied on those who live or work in the city, is a disincentive to some residents and businesses. There is a debate on to what extent it is a disincentive. I will tell you, though, that our earnings tax is, its growth has outpaced our general revenue growth over a number of years. So that shows that it is a growth tax for the city. And that's something that is good to rely on. When you have a city, it's important you have a variety of taxes that you rely on. You don't want to rely on one or the other, because if you do, and you know, one or two of them go down, then it's, you know, you have to diversify. It's like an investment. So that's important to know. But you know, we are a city, not within a county. The city of St. Louis has because of that, we have responsibilities that other cities do not generally have. For example, we fund our circuit attorney's office. That is a state prosecutor's office. Most cities don't have to fund that. I don't know of any cities in Missouri, and maybe there are, that does that. We fund the state courts, including the judges, the court clerk's offices, the sheriff's office. We house state prisoners, and the Board of Elections offices we fund, among others, and I can name more of those. These are traditionally county offices that are usually county or state functions, and something that cities don't normally pay for. The city of St. Louis collects the earnings tax to recognize two important realities. The first, as a city not within a county, within a small area, 62 square miles, by the way. We don't have Kansas City has 318 square miles, so to give you an idea. They're about 5 times larger than we are geographically. Without current ability to annex our neighbors, we cannot pay for these added responsibilities, including public safety costs and infrastructure, by relying on existing property and sales taxes. Our rates are already at the limits set by this General Assembly, and eliminating the revenue generated by the earnings tax would cost us the equivalent of our police department and much more. When your public safety budget is 65%, when you lose a 30-year budget, you're gonna have to have cuts in just about everything you do. Second, beyond the reality imposed by capped tax rates, the historic segregation of the poor, the young, and old. I mean, let's face it. We're 62 square miles, and as time went on, a lot of people moved out of the city of St. Louis. They took their jobs with them. They took their businesses with them. They left behind a lot of environmental contamination, vacant buildings, deteriorating infrastructure, and then people want to know what we're going to do to try to address all these things. So the city was abandoned for a long time. We lost a large population, and I will tell you the vast majority of that population loss had absolutely nothing to do with the earnings tax. A lot of it was racially motivated, and there's a lot of other reasons as well. So, we want to get in that debate. We certainly can do it, but we have challenges, and we're trying to deal with them, and I think we're handling them very well. Second, beyond the reality imposed by the capped tax rates, the historic segregation of the poor, I said, young and old in the city, places extraordinary responsibility and burdens on our government. And of course, these are things that this legislative body can do something about. One of the things that we try to do, as the mayor said, is increase the minimum wage, for example. If you would allow us to expand our city limits and tax base to I-270, and the urgent need for the earnings tax would disappear. Conversely, replace the local cost of social services and other traditionally county functions with state funding, the urgent need for earnings tax would disappear. Barring these common sense but unlikely events, I remain committed to work with you and with regional officials to re-examine every current and other potential source of revenue. And I'm committed to doing that. But I must also respectfully request that you leave the authority to impose a local earnings tax in place and leave its continuation subject to the local control of voters that statewide that the state has imposed. And we had our vote last time, and our voters, 88% of the voters, and they knew what they were voting for. They're not stupid. They know what they were doing. 88% of the voters in the city of St. Louis chose to continue the earnings tax. So that's where we are, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mayor Slay. Before we get started, do you know, is the budget director or collector of revenue or anybody else from the St. Louis here?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we have questions, whether it's you or them, if you can answer them, they'll be here to take those questions.
Yes, I have our budget director with us, Paul Payne.
Okay. The collector's not here?
No, he's not.
Okay. Questions for the witness, Representative Cross.
Inquire.
Proceed.
Mayor Slay, you made a comment that your tax base is diversified within St. Louis. Naturally, as a mayor, people who travel through St. Louis, they stay in a hotel, for example. And I'm assuming, and I'm asking because I don't really know, you have some type of a tax, I guess, or city tax or whatever as part of your tax structure?
We have a hotel. We do have a motel tax, yes.
Okay. And restaurants, do you have an additional tax, like a city tax or whatever? Mayor Slay?
Yes, we do.
Okay. All right.
We have sales taxes, and then there is a restaurant tax as well.
Okay, so help me with this. You have about 4 or 5 different mechanisms which help bring revenue to the city of St. Louis. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, going farther with your square miles is about 61. Is that right?
Yeah, 61.
You're about a fifth, roughly about a fifth of what KCMO is.
That's
that
correct.
Right?
About fifth in area.
Now, if I understand you right, if you we give you the permission to expand your city, because I don't know your city limits, sir. Going east, 270, is that right?
West,
West, I'm
North.
sorry, pardon me.
south, and west.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get an idea here, okay, because I don't know where your city limits come in off the Interstate 70, you know. Where do they come in at?
Well, we're at, they're right about, you know where Clayton is?
Yes.
That we're on Clayton's border.
I think of
Clayton's
I-170, am I saying that right?
And we have on the north, actually, our boundaries do go beyond I-270.
Okay, so the square miles you're trying to, you're saying to add to your municipality is about what? 10, 20, I don't know.
I'm
You're
sorry.
currently 61 point some square miles, is that right?
Yeah.
So by doing that, if we expand that to 270, that adds what? I don't know. I'm messing.
Well, it would, I would say at least 8 times the size of the city.
About 8 times the city.
I'm just guessing.
Which is
it's
giving
big.
you opportunity to expand your services and.
Well, I think if we were to do something like that, there would be a lot of efficiencies that would be brought to the table by consolidation of different things. And for example, we have our own state courts. The county has a state court system.
Okay.
We have our own workforce development agency. They have their own. We have our health department. They have their health department. We have, and then there's a lot of.
I'm trying to push that experience just to get
all
an
those other
idea.
things. Yeah, I would like to see more efficiency and less government, frankly. And I think everybody would benefit better.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Representative Hicks. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for coming today. Great testimony, by the way, by both of you. I have a question. What's the first thing you would have to cut if you lose this tax?
We would have to, we'd have to cut everything. I mean, we'd have to go through and try to.
So we need to cut across the board.
Well, it certainly would be police and fire, because those are some of the biggest portions of our budget. We'd have to cut building division, safety, and other safety things. We have corrections. We have, we also have parks and recreation and forestry and streets and traffic and refuse. I mean, there's a lot of things that the services that we provide that all have to be looked at as we go forward. And it would not be an easy thing. I will tell you, since I've been in office, and we've eliminated nearly 1,000 jobs in the city of St. Louis. Okay? We've done a lot of efficiencies, and we've looked at. We're certainly doing everything we can to be efficient. So but as we go through this, to sit here and say exactly what we would cut and what amount would be irresponsible. One of the things we did when we were making major cuts before, because our pension costs have gone up at one point nearly $90 million over a short period of time. So we had to do a lot. Our healthcare costs went up, fuel costs, and a lot of other things. So we had to do a lot of cutting and things like that. But we did it in a way that allowed, first of all, community to come to the table. We went online. We had people give opinions about what they, we gave them options in terms of what they would suggest. We started charging for trash collection, which we didn't do before. So now everybody in the city of St. Louis pays for their trash collection. So there's just some things we were doing. So we've been working real hard at trying to look at revenue sources and how do we become more efficient. And I think we've done a great job, but frankly, we have a huge amount. It doesn't mean everything's flush. We have a lot of deferred expenses. We have identified about $150 million in just rolling stock and infrastructure needs that are deferred. And we just went to the voters to try to get an increase in that. We got 61% of the vote, but we need 67% to get it passed. So we're going back to the voters with a smaller bond issue to try to work on those things. So we are always trying to manage city government in a very good way. I've got a tremendous, talented team of people. We're always open to ideas. We don't have all the right answers, but to say exactly what we would cut, I think across the board, everything would suffer. And right now, by the way, our police department, because of budgetary issues, we are almost 100 officers out off our authorized strength. I believe we need 200 more officers on top of that, so we're about 300 officers short from what we need in the city of St. Louis. We need this earnings tax to stay in place.
I know how long, but just for the committee's sake, how long have you been mayor of St. Louis?
15 years.
Okay, in those 15 years, how many times have you had to come to the Capitol for this, what we're doing right now? Have you ever been attacked on this in 15 years?
No. not before. Thank you very much for this year. And I would say that, you know, again, I appreciate the fact that those of you that have a real legitimate concern about this, and I certainly hope there are some of you that do. You know, as Mayor Sly James was saying, hey, you know, if somebody has an issue with what we're doing, you know, by the way, thank you for recognizing the city of St. Louis is in the state of Missouri. We really appreciate that. But it's coming to us and having a conversation. I mean, I'm open to that. I've never rejected that. There's a number of you around this table I have a pretty good relationship with. That's because I'm accessible. I talk with you. We work on things together. I've been helped by a number of you around this table. So the relationships are there. You know, why this, you know, gun to the head, you know, attack out of nowhere, it's baffling to me. And I would rather not verbally speculate on why I think that's going on.
Mayor Slay, I think when Representative Matthews pre-filed his bill back in early December, I believe he sent a letter to you and asked for a meeting. Did you and him ever have that meeting?
I don't remember any letter sent to me to have a meeting, and no, we didn't have the meeting. I do not remember ever getting a meeting. In fact, I'm not aware of it. Not aware of any letter.
Further questions, witness?
I mean, somebody could have called up.
Representative Kluga.
Mr. Chair, thank you for being here today. I want to, first of all, dispel a couple of red herrings, and I want to make sure that's crystal clear. First off, regarding some of the legal issues that have been tossed out there, we don't have any legal issues similar to what the city of Baltimore had, correct?
No, we don't. There was one issue about the credit that was brought up. We looked at. We thought, you know, we probably should do this, and we did. So we put this credit in, so we get the full credit. So there's no issues.
Second red herring I think I've seen is something we get tempted to get confused by. We don't give earnings tax rebates to spur economic development. What we do is award TIFs, and state law dictates how those TIFs are put together.
Yeah, well, let me say this. I know where you're going. Okay. First of all, earnings tax is part of TIFs. Okay, in Kansas, I believe in Kansas City, it certainly isn't. I believe that's the way it works. Certainly in the city of St. Louis. So earnings tax is a part of the TIF. So 50% generally in these TIFs work, as you know, 50% of the growth in earnings tax goes into financing whatever it is the business is doing, the development is doing. We've also, in some cases, in very few, I think 5 cases as I understand it, we've allowed firms who are looking at maybe moving or doing something else we give them a rebate on, now they're paying the tax, but we rebate that tax, we rebate that increment. We only rebate 50% of the increment in the earnings tax. So if they hire, you know, 10 more people, then the salaries, the earnings tax that will be paid by those 10 people, and if they've got another 200 employees, those 200 employees, everybody's paying the earnings tax, and the 10 new people pay the earnings tax, but 50% of the earnings tax that they paid goes back into financing, you know, their build out or their expansion or whatever it is they're going to do. So we're very, very judicious on how we use TIFs. We're very judicious on how we do rebates. There are no loopholes. There are no exemptions. There's nobody that doesn't have to pay the tax.
The corporate fat cat doesn't get a pat on the back. What happens is, you know what? You want to create some more jobs. You want to build out your company. You want to improve the infrastructure. We're going to work with you, use our economic development tools that we have to make that happen.
That's great. These are economic development tools that are allowed by the state. We partner with the state. And by the way, thank all of you for all the help that we've had over the years for the different things we're doing. I mean, the state has been partners with us in a lot of these. We couldn't do this without your support and without the state laws that allow us to do it. So I want to thank you for that. And we want to continue being partners with you in economic development, creating jobs, and certainly on anything else.
And the third red herring, I think some people have said that this earnings tax stymies growth. It shoves jobs away. And I think you actually testified that the revenues generated by the earnings tax has increased over the years, which would imply that it hasn't been a hindrance to create more jobs.
Well, here's what I would say. You know, do I think that there's a level of disincentive? Yes. I mean, it just makes sense. But reality, I mean, I really don't get a whole lot of, I mean, in fact, I don't hear anybody telling me how much they dislike, and I'm out in neighborhoods as much as anybody. I went to 100 neighborhood meetings, close to 100 neighborhood meetings last time we got this thing on the ballot. And very, very few people at all would mention anything negative about the earnings tax. And of course, as you saw on the ballot, 88%. And even in the business community, our business community is supporting our efforts here. They're not out there, trying to get rid of the earnings tax. And as I said, in very limited circumstances, we've done some of the rebates, but people are paying it. It just goes back into the development. It's just it's like a tip. It's in the nature of a tip. So I don't see a lot of people saying we're leaving the city because of the earnings tax. Does that mean it's not happening? No. But again, unless we have a viable and acceptable way to replace $164 million, then, and we're certainly always open to ideas, then we need to keep the tax in place.
And now that we've dispelled those rumors, I want to touch just a little bit on some of the things that we've done in St. Louis City to try and highlight some efficiencies, have a smaller, better government. And you've been there for 15 years. My opinion, I think you've taken a little bit of heat from some folks about some of the things that you've tried to do to make government smaller and more efficient. For example, I think under your leadership, we will actually reduce the number of folks on our Board of Aldermen by half. In what year is it?
Well, it'll take effect after the 2020 census, but I think the first election where it'll be 2023, we'll have half the number of aldermen.
So in recognizing the fact that the city has shrunk over the years, perhaps you don't need 28, we can save some money, and move forward into the 21st century.
And we are, by the way, we're very efficient as a government. And when you think about it, we have one mayor, we have one board of aldermen, we have one police department, we have one school district, we have one fire department, and for 320,000 people. So that's relatively very efficient compared to a big part of the St. Louis area.
The last thing I want to ask you about is we had a vote right before we came down to the hearing on a resolution sponsored by Senator Kevin and Representative Hummel regarding a message to Congress saying, hey, we'd like to keep the MGA in the city. And I know you've been heavily involved in negotiating with the federal government on please stay here, and this is what we'd like to do to work with you to help you stay here. Does this conversation about doing away with the earnings tax affect that negotiation?
I haven't seen that it does, but I will tell you that if there's something that I can't see that it does affect that. I'll be straight with you there, but I will also tell you that the thing that I worry about, it can impact in our credit rating, because anytime somebody's looking at trying to take away the largest revenue source from a city, the bond companies and the rating agencies are looking at these things going, what the heck's going on here? So it does raise an issue every time we go in for when we get our bond ratings. So this kind of discussion is very serious. I want everybody to know this is a very serious discussion we're having here. And I hope you realize this, because when we borrow money, our credit rating matters, And so certainly want you to keep that in mind as you go forward. That I don't sense that it's having an issue there at all. I do think that when they consider where they're going to go, one of the things that they consider is a negative impact it's going to have. See, they're concerned about the negative impact it's going to have on the jurisdiction that they're leaving. And so the fact that it's going to cost us, if they move, about $2.5 million in earnings tax is something that they consider before they make a decision to move. So they are actually, that's something that is because that's a question I've asked, and that's something that they're considering.
Thank you.
Representative Sayre. Proceed.
Good evening. How are you? I have clarification questions, and I might ask your budget chair as well. For you in the TIF, on a regular TIF, half the new revenue, right?
Right.
My first question was, well, it got answered. But the second is, if you want to retain someone, company in the city, and it's not a TIF, do you say if you stay, and hire more people, they'll pay the earnings, but do you say, and rebate the half, 50% of the gain is what I'm getting at, back to them improving their infrastructure? So it's not a TIF.
Well, it's in the nature of a TIF.
It's a nature of a TIF.
It's an increment, in other words, 50% of the increment on the earnings tax.
Okay.
And I think we've done that. There's 5 active situations that I'm aware of in the city where we did that. And again, we don't, there's no exemption, there's no abatement in that sense, but there is a rebate in the nature of a TIF of 50% of the growth in the earnings tax.
Right.
So if they've got 300 employees, they're all going to continue to pay the earnings tax. If they hire another 50, then on the 50, the new hires, then 50% of their earnings taxes would be rebated back to the company to expand, to do a build out, to do whatever it is they want to do.
Would they want to do that? Do you ask them to reinvest it, or do you just give it to them?
The way it works is they have plans on what they're going to do. I mean, we sit down and we negotiate. We know exactly what they're going to do. I mean, it's not just going to, this actually goes towards improvements generally.
And what if this was in a TIF area already? This would be another incentive on top of that, correct? If you had a TIF, this is theoretical.
Yeah, and that's theoretical. I don't know that we've done that. I just don't know offhand. I don't know how to answer that question.
Okay. Then I'm going.
Because I don't know how we double the, if it's already within a TIF area and they're being, I just don't.
You could.
Yeah.
It's possible.
I don't know if we're doing that or not. I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
That's why I'm not sure how it works.
And I can really appreciate, and I guess we've known each other almost the full time you've been in office, but I can sure appreciate your position here. I also appreciate the fact that you are very willing to work on making a solution and, keeping your city viable. So I really appreciate that. And I'll come back to you. I'm going to go to him right now. You mentioned, or the mayor mentioned, that you get 164 million.
Right.
Okay, with the earnings tax, that's a third of your budget. Do you know how many people currently pay it?
In a census survey of the distribution of those individuals who pay it.
Yeah, because, well, how many, and then my next question would be how many individuals and how many businesses?
Sure. The earnings tax in the city is about 81% paid by individuals and about 19%, at least in terms of our total receipts, is paid by business profit portion. I don't have the breakout in terms of the dollar value.
Well, I just say 164, 81% of that.
Yeah. Well,
right.
What I'm saying is in terms of the number of individuals you have.
Okay.
Total workforce, that would be those people living or working in the city.
Yeah.
Plus non-residents who work in the city.
Right.
Census surveys for the last, this goes back to 2010, but it was about 321,000 individuals, and that's based on survey information about the U.S. Census Bureau.
And that would be people that work in St. Louis,
So
not necessarily
city residents
live.
working in the city.
All right.
City residents working outside the city.
Okay.
Or non-city residents working inside the city.
And do you have any ratio about how many people live in the city and pay it versus the working outside?
Sure. Based on that census survey information, that would be about 55%.
55% live in the city?
No, outside.
Outside, okay. That, I guess, is one of my concerns, that 55% don't get to vote on this tax. So and 50% of Mayor James, you know.
And again, I had some prepared remarks, but I'll skip those. But the key component, and I've heard this basically from both the mayor as well as Mayor James from Kansas City, there's a whole slew of services that we provide in the city of St. Louis. It is the center of the St. Louis region and metro area. All the cultural amenities are in the city, entertainment venues are in the city, the major Forest Park is in the city. Basically is the center of the region. All of those people who come into the city, whether to work or to play or to come and see a play or go to a ball game, they are beneficiaries of the services that the city provides. And this is a mechanism for allowing for the cost of those services to be shared by those who actually benefit from them. Again, our revenue base is comprised of a variety of revenue sources. Earnings tax is one of those main sources. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to distribute the cost of services equitably among those who benefit the most from the services. The earnings tax is paid by non-residents, a means for them to participate in as well in the services they benefit from when they visit the city.
Well, I don't want to be but the zoo is paid for by zoo tax, and when I go down, I pay for the Fox and I pay for the
only if you work. Actually, it's only if you work you live in the city of St. Louis or St. Louis County. Other surrounding don't even contribute at all to the zoo.
Well, that's the zoo tax, right?
That's our property.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the other thing with that is that goes to funding the zoo. Okay, that doesn't go to fund. That doesn't go to fund the police department, the fire department, the street department, the parks department.
Do they pay? Do the zoo employees pay earnings tax? Now we're kind of getting on.
They do. They do.
Right
The zoo employees do pay earnings tax. Anybody that lives or works in the city. But the thing to keep in mind is that when they're there, they are taking advantage of what we are. And as our budget director said, Paul said, that we have a whole bunch of people coming into our city like no other. I mean, St. Louis downtown, by the way, I believe this, is the largest employing base district anywhere in the Midwest next to Chicago. I mean, think about it for a minute. When you think about it downtown, we probably have, and that's right, we probably have 80,000+ people that work in downtown St. Louis. I don't know that there's any other employment center that it has that many employees in such a short area. Our Central West End is probably the most dense area anywhere in the same area.
I get you.
And so we have all these people coming in to work. They go to all of our functions. They come to ball games. They come to big football games. They come to the hockey games. They come to baseball games. They come to parades. They come to our city. And we have the responsibility of making sure the people there are safe. We have ambulance, we have police, we have fire, we have street department, we have electric signals, we have parks that they attend and go to that we have to pay for. And so these are all things that cost us money that a lot of other cities don't have. And when you talk about not voting on it,
I'm not saying get rid of that revenue. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of why some people want to get rid of it.
Yeah, no, I get that part. But there are a lot of taxes. I mean, most taxes probably are taxes people don't vote on, and they still pay. When you think about it, whether it's property tax, whether it's business taxes, sales taxes, these are taxes we all pay, and we don't vote on if it's not in the jurisdiction where we vote.
And back to the budget guy. Do you know what % are from St. Louis County, or I live in St. Charles? Would you be able to get that data?
That's public information. That's publicly available.
At work in the city?
What I have got is U.S. Census Bureau data, which tracks county workflows from where you work to where you live, and that's going back to 2010. So this is not actual payments within the collector revenue's office, but based on that information from the U.S. Census Bureau. And I could actually I could.
Okay, yeah, and that'd be just interesting to know. Representative Colonna mentioned that some have said it's a disincentive for working or moving or whatever. Is there a sweet spot of any mathematical computation that, or could you quantify how many people are moving out or do not want to work in the city because of that earnings tax? Is there any way to quantify that?
know how to go about that. I can tell you, as was said by the mayor, is that in looking at the growth of the earnings tax, it's one of our largest. It's one of our largest and most reliable growers in terms of the following the growth of our economy. So it grows more than the overall general revenue fund base. And so it's something that is a key component of our revenue base. And I you would hate to see anything jeopardize that.
But Mayor, you'd be open to, I realize that you've had to become more efficient just as a matter of course over years. Perhaps it is time to have that discussion about how would you replace it? It's not always just shifting taxes. It's, how would you replace it? We can have that discussion, or?
I can tell you this, that's where, where it gets difficult.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to say, get rid of this tax, but you tell people, you tell them, we want to do a payment in lieu of taxes for nonprofits, okay? You can see what kind of issue that's got, and these are some ideas that have been brought up. What if we do taxes on services? Well, you're going to tax lawyers and accountants that are in the city of St. Louis. We have a lot of high-tech people. These are services, and they're not selling things. You start taxing them, maybe they'll move someplace else too. I mean, that may be just as much as a disincentive. You have things like you tell people, we'll raise your property taxes instead. It's like, well, we don't want to see that happen. So, it's the devil's in the details, okay? It's real easy to sit here and say, there's a bad tax, you need to replace it. But getting to what we replace it with, I mean, if we're going to do that, is really the issue of the day. And there has been studies done. There has been, I've seen a report. There's been discussions about it. But actually, and by the way, I've said this, I'm open to anybody who's really legitimately interested in this issue for apolitical reasons, sit down and discuss this thing. But in the meantime, we need to get the voters of St. Louis to vote it in again and then move forward because without it, it would be devastating to the city of St. Louis.
Well, it certainly can't happen overnight. I absolutely understand it. And my last question, do you have any idea how much in abatement incentives, for those businesses that you give in total?
Actually, in the information that provided, which was requested.
Is it this sideways one?
Yeah, you should have received an exhibit. Actually, I've got a separate one that summarizes this. Part of it was on our city's website, and then there's some detail behind that.
Okay.
If you're referring to tax increment financing.
Well, specifically this extra
Oh,
incentive.
the other individuals. That was also included on a separate exhibit. In the last fiscal year, the total revenues associated with those agreements, and I'll exclude a transportation development district, but I'll explain that in a second.
Okay.
Was about $801,000.
801 came out for the earnings tax.
No.
That's what I'm interested in.
Okay, and
Yeah.
there is a detail which you should have, and if you don't, I'll make sure you have it.
Okay.
And this is comprised of various sales taxes, as well as some portion of the earnings tax. And this will summarize it by revenue source, as well as by agreement.
Okay.
And that total was in FY15, $801,031.
And of that, how much is the earnings?
The earnings tax total.
Extra rebate or extra?
Again, that would have been a rebate of the incremental.
Yes.
The incremental earnings tax or whatever these revenues were.
Exactly.
Over and above the time of the agreement. And the earnings tax piece of that was $325,044.
Okay, thank you.
No.
It was not hundreds of millions.
No.
Thank you. Thanks for your indulgence.
Representative Hummel, proceed.
Mr. Mayor, you touched on something that I wanted to bring up, and I think that everybody that's either sat on the budget or has talked about the state bond rating that we have, we realize how hard it is to maintain a bond rating. And I want to we're going to point out to the committee that for St. Louis and Kansas City, just having this forced on us to have a vote every 5 years makes it difficult to maintain our bond rating, because the bond rating agencies contact us and get nervous about whether or not we will be able to pay our bills every 5 years. Is that not correct?
Yes, that's correct. That is correct.
Representative Hanson. Proceed.
You know, when relocating, they have different criteria. And I think I heard you say you don't see this as a detriment for businesses moving into the city or not.
I think there's arguably, and I mean, look, it's arguably a disincentive. You know, people do look at tax environments when they decide where to go. But in my experience as mayor of 15 years, I don't see it as the big problem that some others do.
All right. Since you've been mayor 15 years, are there fewer businesses in the city of St. Louis now than there was when you started?
No, I would say, well, first of all, it's, we have, I would say, I tell you what, our economy's changed a lot in the city of St. Louis, so that's why it's hard to answer the question. We have been, we have been rated, one of the top places in the country for college-educated young people to move into. We have been rated number one by different authorities as the best place to start a business.
Yeah, I've been following that.
St. Louis City has. We are known for our technology, our Cortex, and our research. And by the way, this body and this state has really helped us create that environment. And we are attracting. You know what's attracting people to our city? In spite of the earnings tax, the fact that we have a lot of great culture, some of the best cultural entertainment attractions of any place in the country. We have some great places to baseball and a lot of sports. We also have unique spaces and great neighborhoods and architectural stuff. And there's just so much people like it. It's easy to get around. You've got density. You've got a lot of places to go to eat. We have in downtown St. Louis. Nearly 300 bars and restaurants in downtown St. Louis that people enjoy. So yeah, just in downtown last
year,
would be the
15
new restaurants opened in downtown last year.
Yeah. You got good ones. What would be the unemployment rate?
We're probably, the exact number is what, 9%?
No, it's actually lower than that. In the last few months, it's come down.
In your vote, 88% of the people voted for the earnings tax.
Yes.
Of course, the unemployed, or if they don't have an income, probably voted for it. And the retired people don't have to pay it. What's a retired population in your city? What percent of that 88?
Hey, all I can tell you is it's like with any other election. Anybody can vote, and 88%, I can tell you that a lot of people who voted work, go to neighborhood meetings, love the city, understand the tax, and they're fine with it. I mean, that's the only thing we got to go by. I mean, we can speculate on who voted, but in the end, 88% is pretty high.
When's the vote supposed to take place?
April 5th.
What if they came in 40% in favor? Now, I know it's speculating, but you wouldn't look to the state
if it came in at 44%, we would be scrambling to figure out what we're going to do to replace the earnings tax over.
I know you would, but you wouldn't be calling down here and saying, could you help us with $100 million or whatever, right?
Well, hopefully I wouldn't have to do that. Because
if you lost that much money.
Pardon me?
If you lost the money generated, the $164 million went away.
Whatever we can find out what we're going to do to replace it.
In other words, you wouldn't be looking here first, right?
Well, I would certainly hope you guys would, since you're so interested in us doing something different, you might be able to come up with ways that I suggested some of them here that you could do to help us address it. Of course.
Yeah.
Of course I'd be coming up here asking you for help. I mean, we are a second largest city in the state. You know, when I first saw this, I have to be honest with you, okay? I'm thinking, yeah, this is, you know, a political thing, because I can't imagine that the state legislature would be so irresponsible to think about taking away the largest revenue source for the two largest cities in the state without any kind of reason or any kind of suggestion on what we're going to do to replace it. Now, I hope I was right there, okay? But in case I'm not, we will be back here trying to figure out what we're going to do, because this is really serious stuff here.
Well, yeah, it is.
I mean, not only will we be losing the revenue on an incremental basis over a period of time, but we talk about things like, you know, bond ratings, to be able to, you know, borrow money and do things you need to do to build your city. You think businesses are going to want to be in a city that is going to be bankrupt and functionally bankrupt, not be able to provide the services? That'll run businesses out, I think, pretty quickly. I wouldn't want to be in a city that can't support a police department, a fire department,
You know,
ambulances,
Yeah.
streets.
I'm trying to get.
And we already are, as I said, struggling with, as all major cities, doing the things we need to do to have the optimum services for the people we represent. I think we do a really good job on a very difficult circumstance. You take this earnings tax, even on an incremental basis, let me tell you, it's going to be a problem.
Well, I understand that. I mean, it's 164 million. I'm not here to criticize how you run your city. I was wondering why I was here at all when you get 88% of the vote and 78% in Kansas City. If you listen to my comments earlier, probably wouldn't be jumping on me. Thank you.
Further questions for the witness, Representative Rowden.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, Tinsley.
Proceed.
Thanks. Thank you, Mayor, for being here. Appreciate it, and appreciate both of your candor. It's a good dialogue to have. Just a couple of questions, and mostly somewhat technical in nature. Mayor James talked a little about the origin of the earnings tax in Kid City. Can you tell me a little bit about the origin in St. Louis?
Yes, it was passed by the General Assembly, authorized it in 1948 as a half cent, and then it was in 1959. It was we got authorization to go to 1%, and I'm sorry, it was a 0.5%, and then we were authorized to 1% in 1959, and it's been unchanged since then.
Was that the result of any variable or set of variables within the local economy at that time, or is there any way of knowing that?
I know that they were talking about 1959. I'm sure that there was
probably some issues.
Anybody know any of that? That's all I know about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're a big city. We have a lot of issues, so we need to. Okay. It had to do with. By the way, it had to do with the mass exodus to the suburbs. We were losing population before we had that earnings tax, the 1% earnings tax. I think on the average about 100,000 people we lost a decade. I think there was one decade though after we had earnings tax we lost. I mean, over a period of years we lost a lot of people, but. Rob,
that's fine.
Development direction.
That's fine.
He says it had to do with the mass exodus to the people were starting to move out of the city. And as I said, when they left, they took their businesses with them. They took their, and we needed to make sure that we had the resources to do what we need to do.
Kind of in that same line, I mean, we've talked about the city has shrunk, fairly considerably over the last number of years. You talked a little bit about maybe what are some underlying causes of that. Is it still folks going to St. Charles County, folks going to St. Louis County? Is it racial issues? All of the above? Is that your calculation being inside and living and eating and breathing? What would you say?
I think that there's a lot of different reasons why people move out to the suburbs. They move out of there. They want to get out of the hustle bustle of the city. They want to be in an area. Sometimes they want to buy a new home and green pastures and all that. They want to. I think some of it's in the past more so than in the present. It was racially motivated. But I do think that, and what happens is that, and I think people, when you move your jobs out there, you know, when you move out to, when somebody moves out, then they want to move their business out there with them. And then they bring their employees out there. And so the employees go, well, I'm going to be working at this business, so I'm going to move out closer to where I work. So there's a lot of different reasons why people move out of a city. I do think that, you know, generally in an inner city, you'll have a higher level of crime. So I do think that some people move out because they want to get away from, you know, that. And but I also so there's a lot of reasons why people move out. Now I will tell you that there was we have leveled off pretty well. I mean, while we're still losing a net number of people based on the estimates over the past 15 years or so, we have it pretty much leveled off since 2001. We've seen.
So 01 was the peak?
Somewhere after the 2000 census.
What was that?
Well, now you're going to test my memory, but we had a limited drop in.
It was over 1 million at some point, right?
I think we had we had 850,000 people in 1950. And I think over a period of years, I want to say back in 2000, I think the census was like 340,000. Okay. I think that's correct.
Okay.
So over a period of time that we've seen, we've lost a net. Now there's still people moving.
Sure. There's more moving out.
There's more moving out, but that number looks like it's still slowing down and even out even more.
What's the current credit rating? You may have said that before, and I may have missed it.
Single A plus.
It's a single A plus.
You talked about the size. Give me the number again. You said it. The size of government in the 15 years since you've been there, as far as people. We actually there's about the number of employees.
Okay. Yeah, it's gone down by nearly 1,000 since.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the budget done during that time?
Well, it's also declined. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. The number of employees have gone down over the time period.
Yeah.
I'd have to actually. You got a second?
Sure.
Pick that up.
That 1,000 down is in your.
Somewhere around 7,000, and we've reduced it by about 1,000. So
and that's in your time.
And during while I was mayor.
Okay.
So we had about 7,000 employees. We're down to about, and then this is just rough numbers.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Somewhere around 6,000.
So then in that same time period, 15-year time period, I think a budget number, what the budget has done during that time would be an appropriate metric as well.
It's gone up by about 100 million, hasn't it?
Oh, sure.
Overall.
Yeah. In FY01, total general fund expenditures were about about $388 million.
Okay.
And now this year we're at 492.6.
So it's a little over 100.
Over 100. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I think tax revenues. Well, I guess salaries go up. Sales taxes have gone up.
Some of that's going to be inflationary as well.
Sure, inflationary.
Probably not $100 million worth, but yeah.
But no, it's. I think it's basically.
I mean, if you go
the
back,
big thing is the earnings tax. I mean, that's going up pretty.
the long-term growth rate for our earnings tax is about 2.7%.
So the earnings tax is a metric of health in some aspect, but yet the city is shrinking. It's not I'm not trying to back you in a corner.
I'm
the numbers
don't. Questions. Yeah, it is what it is, and we're here to just tell the truth.
Yeah, the numbers just those kind of metrics that are used to get where we're going. Some of those things don't match up in my brain. So I'm just trying to figure out how.
Well, here's what I will tell you. For example, I think, and there was a point where, for example, our pension costs. There was a point when we were up almost 100 million. In revenue since I took office, but our pension costs went up by the same amount. So for every new dime that we received went into the pension systems. No new benefits. And So what we have done is we had to go out and borrow $400 million to help make that, so we can pay off our pension obligations, you know. So we borrowed that, and we're still paying it off, and we're still paying it off. But the other thing is that in addition to, you know, pension costs increasing, we have, you know, some modest pay raises over the years. We have had, you know, fuel costs increase, and other costs just go up. Healthcare costs have gone up. So we've been balancing. Actually, the reason we had to eliminate 1,000 jobs is so that we can balance our budget and run the city as efficiently and as responsibly as we have. So we're proud of the work we've been able to do. We did take on one of the pension systems. We have 3 in the city, and we were able to do some modest modifications with our fire department that ended up saving us that, and plus a few other things, saved us about $11 million in 1 year. So we're trying to do what we can as we go forward.
What are the 3?
We have a general employees pension fund, we have a firefighters pension fund, we have a police department pension fund. And the police department that's your guys' responsibility. We pay it, but you control it.
Yeah. So overall, you know, a person in some cases a business in St. Louis, where's your highest tax rate? So in Columbia, where I live, you know, there are certain places where folks could be paying up to, you know, 10% in some places as far as sales tax goes. So I'm just curious about, when we talk about, you know, how these taxes kind of stack on top of each other, just curious about, you know, where you guys are at in maybe the higher tax areas.
Talking about sales tax?
Yeah, yeah.
We're nearly 9%.
Yeah.
And that includes state.
Yeah, right, right.
It's nearly 9%, just under 9%.
So, and then potentially some other.
8.679.
So potentially some other TIFs and TDDs and.
Right, which
would
would be on it. So
yeah,
if you've got our basic rate, this includes the state sales tax, is 8.679%.
Okay.
So if you've got a 1% TDD, then you'd be paying 9.67.
Yeah. Yeah. So okay. And you also have a 0.5% payroll thing?
Yes, that's correct.
On business? Okay. And I think they asked a question, I mean, you kind of alluded to, the economy has changed to some degree, businesses up or down in the city.
I'm sorry, what was
that? In the 15-year period, and I'm not using that as an aim at you, but just for reference of where we're at, number of businesses in the city, I assume it's gone down just because if population's going down, there's got to be a reason for that. And I think Mayor Slay alluded to the fact that if businesses go out, people go out with it in some cases.
I would say there's a combination of a lot of things going on. In the last 20 years, you also had a lot of corporate buyouts where you had major companies buying out headquarters companies, and we've experienced that as well, as many other cities have. I mean, Anheuser-Busch, for example.
Sure.
That was a major acquisition. We took the hit there. So I think. Again, I don't have any numbers in front of me in terms of actual number of jobs and changes, but we've experienced the same changes as many other cities have, just the globalization of many of its corporate headquarters.
You think there's any, Columbia's pretty lucky on a number of fronts, and I just use that as my frame of reference. It's where I live. I mean, our unemployment's at 2.8%, one of the lowest in the country. What would you, any thought on why St. Louis's would be that much higher? Just a couple, 120 miles down the road.
You're basically going to be dealing with a lot of the demographic challenges that the mayor has addressed earlier.
I mean, I don't know the demographics of Columbia. We have 30% power. We have 30% of our people in the city of St. Louis that are living under the poverty line.
It's about 7 Columbia. Okay, just a couple more housekeeping things. We kept talking about this abatement stuff, and I get that I don't think it is exactly what it was painted to be earlier, and I understand that. There was the article that was in the Post-Dispatch that specifically talked about, and this may be inside. I think Mayor Slide alluded to. There are 4 or 5 companies that maybe got a different deal, and a couple of them were mentioned: 09 Anthem, Wells Fargo in 2012. Is that inside the 4 or 5 companies that he alluded to?
Yeah, the 4 or 5 companies, the ones that the existing active companies. The Wells Fargo, by the way, as I'm told by the comptroller's office, is now complete. One of the
Yeah, it fades out at some point.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and it met that.
Sure.
Okay, the last fiscal year, so it's no longer active.
For our unemployment rate, we just looked it up, it's just under 7%, it's 6.8%.
Okay.
So that's dropped some.
Okay. I think my, just the last point, we talked a little bit about, and I played, admittedly played some role in the minimum wage legislation that made its way through the process last year. I think my concern, and the chairman was hitting on it a little bit, there's 2 different ways to take a bite out of the apple here. I think my concern, one way almost solely puts the burden of finding ways to lift folks out of poverty on the backs of business owners, whereas the other way potentially puts it on the back of a government entity, right? So, because if you're talking about raising a minimum wage, you can't argue the fact that that's going to have a negative impact of some sort on the business. You're telling them that artificially we're going to tell you what you pay your folks regardless of who they are and what their education is and what their value is to the business. Whereas I think in this case, there is this earnings tax that these folks that you force them to pay regardless. And so I think I would rather err on the side of letting the business have the opportunity to grow your economy, as opposed to just artificially growing the economy by making those low-income folks pay this tax.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to get into the minimum wage debate here, but I thought we've already decided as a nation that there will be a minimum wage, and there is one. Sure. The question is where it should be, and if you compare it to where it was back in the late '60s to where it is now, it's a lot lower. On a dollar for dollar basis, based upon. So it's a lot lower than it was back then. But we can always debate on what that is, but I think we've already decided as a nation that there is and will be a minimum wage. We're going to disagree on what that ought to be. I'd like to see it, back closer to where it was in 1969 than it is today. So.
Further discussion? Everyone in favor? I have a few follow-ups. Can you tell me, anyone, and first of all, gentlemen in the glasses, can you identify yourself to the committee?
Yeah. My name is Rob Orr.
I appreciate it.
And he's with our development agency, so you can ask questions.
Perfect. I appreciate it. If you all could fill out witness forms, just so we know who is here, who's with the manager, I would sure appreciate that. Can you tell me what percentage of these collections come from people earning, say, $25,000 a year or less?
No, I can't.
Who could?
The collector of revenue is the agency that collects the actual tax. Now, I don't know what.
And they're not here tonight?
No, they're not. The collector of revenue under our antiquated system of government is separately elected. A lot of people in St. Louis does not report to me, but no, he's not here.
Would he have that information?
He should. I don't know. I mean, I would assume he would because he would know how much, who pays the tax and how much they're paying. And I guess he can tell based upon the taxes that are paid, how much money they're making.
I think, have you ever asked him for this information?
Well, frankly, I do know he received, you gave us, my office,
right,
some requests for documents, Sunshine Act requests, which we passed on to his office because they're responsible for it. So in that sense, we've asked him to compile all the records that would be responsive to your request.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I plan to follow up with him because I'm concerned about the fact that we're setting a policy here and we don't even know who pays this and how much it falls on those who earn maybe under the poverty level or at the poverty level. As I expressed earlier, I have fairly serious concerns about the regressive nature of this tax. And I'm a little concerned that we don't have that information, but I know I did send some
information you need. We want you to make sure we give it to you.
I appreciate that. I know I did send several freedom FOIA requests, whatever, and I appreciate the documents that you've got. I'd like to go through them in a little bit. You listed approximately $3.5 million of revenue, foregone revenue for developmental financing and incentives. And I wondered how you came up with that number.
Yeah, I know. This is actually from the accounting system of the city of St. Louis. So I pulled those actual figures from the accounting system of the city of St. Louis. Upon consultation with the City of St. Louis Controller's Office, which provided me with the information I needed to know to be able to identify. If you see in that one exhibit, there's an ordinance number.
Which exhibit are you talking about?
That 3 million
The 3.5 that comes from this. This was in the letter that I put, the 3.5 million revenue. Is it the account number 4151020? Is that what you're referencing?
Is that that exhibit I had earlier? Is it the non-TIF development initiative? Is that what you're referencing?
This is from the letter, what I'm referencing, at least preliminarily, is this from the letter that I sent, documents that show how $3.5 million of revenue from corporate earnings tax used for developmental project financing and other developmental project incentives was filed for fiscal year 2015.
I see in FY15 there's $3.2 million.
Okay.
Is that?
And that's the second thing, right below it. Okay.
Okay. Well, let me clarify.
Please do. I would appreciate that.
Okay, sure. This is the document that you referenced on the website. So this is actually, we created this so you can actually take a look at this, and this is available to everyone. What you have, what I have sent in subsequent to your request was, first of all, the actual source documents used to create this document. So you have the same information that I did create. In addition to that, what you have is a section of the comptroller's financial annual report. It's on a cash basis. It's not the capper, but it's on a cash basis, which details every TIF agreement that the city has at the end of the last fiscal year, FY15. That would be June 30th. And what it does, it doesn't break out all the revenue.
That exhibit 9.1.
Actually, it's exhibit 9. And then there's also the exhibit 9.1 is detailing every existing TIF agreement and the existing balance as of the end of last fiscal year.
Can you walk me through these abatements?
Again, those aren't abatements.
Okay, right. We're TIFs and abatements, different things.
Okay,
Explain
sure.
the difference here today. And I know it's 9:30 and we're here to discuss
Okay,
tax policy.
okay,
Terrible, but please, for the edification, if you could.
Okay, which doc you want? Which doc?
So, well, let's start with this. What's the difference between abatements and TIFs?
Well, as discussed earlier, abatement is like when it's a property. It's usually associated with property tax. So you are going to say, well, I'm going to build this this new apartment building or what have you, and they give them a property tax abatement, so that now what you had was a vacant lot, and but you built this apartment building, and for the next 10 years, some entire property tax is abated, not charged on that particular property. That is not what we're talking about here.
Okay.
Okay. Now, when you talk about TIFs, the tax increment financing, that's when you have, as many of you know, TIFs of your own in your own localities. That's when you have a business improvement project that has some public infrastructure needs or something to where the locality or the city, in this case the city of St. Louis, wants to incentivize the development to occur, otherwise it would not occur, theoretically. And so you basically say, well, we are going to establish a base of the amount of revenue that's created at that location. Sometimes there is no revenue. Other times that might be an improvement over an existing base. And then you use a portion of the increment of the revenue created as a result of that development to offset or to pay off what are financed improvements to the site that allow the development to occur.
You agree that both TIFs and abatements, they're both it's revenue that's foregone by the city?
Not necessarily, because the question is this: would that revenue have occurred without it? I mean, basically, what you're saying is when you're trying to remember, this is an increment, so it's not saying you're not giving away something you've got in hand. What you're doing is you're giving a portion of whatever new revenues you have created. And so the idea is that you haven't lost anything. You have utilized part of the increase to actually make that happen. And then once the TIF is paid off, then you've got the increase. It's pretty clear from that.
Yeah, when we do TIFs, one of the things we look at, we try to look at it as, you know, what needs to be done to either attract this business or keep the business there. And we use a but-for, and we do use a but-for, and Rob's here, you can talk about that. We do use a but-for approach. So we try to determine, you know, but-for these.
But this is all theoretical. It's possible that if you didn't have the TIF, they'd still build, they'd still have the increase, and you would make 100% of it instead of giving 50% of it back.
I would tell you, we have a pretty good idea that if we're going to, you know, we're competing, by the way. As you know, there are TIFs being given out all over the state of Missouri, all over the St. Louis area, and all over this nation.
And they don't, but there may be TIFs being given out in other areas of the state. They don't necessarily have an earnings tax, correct?
Well, no,
And so what I'm just trying to figure out is where you might have revenue that you're not necessarily collecting. Because this particular thing, that 50% of that increase you're not collecting, correct? You're giving it back to somebody.
50% of the increase, right, we're not collecting. The point is, though, that this wouldn't be there if we didn't provide this incentive. That business
theoretically usually wouldn't be there.
Well, theoretically, and by the way, you know, nobody's got a magic wand. They can say for sure what it is. It's just like any other TIF. It's just like any other TIF. It does include the earnings tax in this case. But one of the things that the idea is that we try to figure out what we need to do to keep this business here. And theoretically, if we don't provide this incentive, we're not only not going to keep that business or attract that business, we might not, in a case where we already have a business, we might not keep that business. We may be losing some revenue. It's, for example, you know, what we're trying to do to attract, to keep the you know, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. We don't. There's things the state's doing to help us keep those jobs, and we appreciate it in the state of Missouri. Do we know for sure that if those incentives aren't put there and those improvements in that, it's going to go somewhere else? Now, we got a pretty good idea that it will if we don't do it. That doesn't mean we know for sure. So we are competing with other jurisdictions that provide similar incentives, and we're trying to do what we can to maintain a strong tax base. And what we're doing is with TIFs, it's just focused on the increment in the revenue. So you know, the base that was already there stays, and we're trying to grow that base by just rebating 50% of the increment for the improvements that you're trying to make. So I think TIFs are great. I like them. I think they're effective, and they've been a big part of our economic development strategy, and I think it's worked in a lot of ways.
In Exhibit 9.1, this is the number of TIFs. I believe there's 156 listed. Is that correct?
Yes, there's some of them that aren't active.
Right. And they have established dates, but they don't necessarily have maturity dates listed there.
Yeah, there will be some that will be authorized that maybe have never been issued and things like that, but that was a list as of the end of this.
And the outstanding principal balance as of June 30, 2015 is $380 million.
Right.
That's $380 million that you all have had to bond, is that?
With TIF revenues. And let me also point out with TIF, except for one agreement, the city does not guarantee those TIF agreements. It is the revenue generated by the TIF development that guarantees the agreement. So the general fund is not on the hook for that debt. It is by development, by the increment generated by the project itself, which, by the way, they pay the tax. So people are saying, oh, they're not paying the tax. No, they're paying the tax. The tax is being used to pay off the TIF, the financing agreements issued by the TIFs. So
we're not paying it. I mean,
it's easy to say they pay the tax, but that doesn't mean that tax goes back to the city.
Well, it's paying.
It's going to that special pot.
Well, it's paying off the.
And then part of that goes back to the developer, whoever it is.
Let me give you another example. I mean, there are all sorts of.
But am I right about that? Do I have that?
Oh, go ahead.
So when you say, well, they're still paying, yes, they're paying it, but it goes into this pot, and then half of it goes back to the developer. Is that correct?
It actually no. It pays off the outstanding principal related to all of these TIF agreements. So that's why it's on the city's books. I mean, you can see it here. I mean, it's basically paying off all those outstanding principal amounts you see on.
But that $380 million, the city can't spend on police and fire, can they?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And so I'm just trying to figure out, like, $380 million, that's a substantial amount of money that can't be used.
That is completely apples and oranges when you're talking about operating costs. For instance, let's one of the bigger developments we've had, and I don't want to tramp on development, on his territory, but IKEA, for instance, that's a major coup for the city of St. Louis. And that was incentivized. There was a certain amount of incentive. Now, you're going to tell me that that's not bringing in people from outside of the area to shop at IKEA? I mean, that's a major coup.
We're drawing people from, I'm told, 6 states to that location. It's packed all the time. It's generating revenue, and it's helping pay for itself. Those revenues would not be there without the IKEA. That's the idea behind the tax increment financing. That, I mean, you're saying that, oh, we'd have this $300 million if we didn't grant these TIFs. I can tell you pretty assuredly that would not be the case. We would not have, I can't say none of these, but I would say the vast majority of these we would not have if we didn't have those incentives in place. And we wouldn't have that that $300 million would be on these TIFs. But that's money that they're paying. That's money coming from their operation. And as the TIF is, it's only a portion of the increase in the revenues that are generated.
How does one get one of these? Do they approach the city? Does the city approach them? How does that process occur?
They make application to our TIF commission in the city of St. Louis.
We have representatives on that TIF commission from the public school district and a whole bunch of different representatives of the city. So you've got people that are on the TIF commission that represent the community.
Okay. This other document that was included, this Fund 1414 Special Redevelopment Agreement revenues.
Yes.
What's that?
You would ask about detail of the non-TIF type agreements.
Right.
These are those incentives related to portions of earnings taxes rebated to companies to improve their campuses or what have you, to increase the number of jobs or retain the number of jobs that they have.
Okay.
That's also based on the increase.
Okay, but that's not necessarily a tip, that's something.
No, there is, not that, there is no debt associated with that.
Okay.
With those agreements.
Going back to, so you explained that TIFs are not abatements, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then how about the abatements? How does one get an abatement from the city?
Now, the abatement, as you know, is the same thing. It's an abatement on the increase in what would be the increase in the taxes. Here's Ron.
So for abatement, the applicant would apply to our Land Clearance for Redevelopment Authority or this Planned Industrial Expansion Authority. And as the mayor said, the current tax rate that property is generating will continue to be paid. But the increase in the improvements, the increased value that would increase the assessment can be frozen essentially for 5 years, 10 years. We are starting to reduce the number of years that certain projects are getting, and we're also being a lot stingier with tax abatement as we see certain neighborhoods develop and no longer require that redevelopment incentive.
So what happens is,
Mr. Chairman, I want to make sure I understood the question correctly. We're talking about abatement on earnings tax.
No, we don't have abatement on earnings tax.
Well, then,
We're talking about, we're talking about real estate tax abatement. That's what we're talking about. And basically, what the
We're
real
not
estate.
trying to establish revenue that's foregone by the city.
Well, this isn't foregone. Here's what it is. What we do is we'll have a feed up piece of property. Somebody wants to buy it, and they want to put a lot of improvements. We want to incentivize those improvements so they're not penalized by investing in it. So we'll freeze the taxes at the current level for 5 or 10 years. They will invest in the building. Their taxes will remain frozen. We don't give them money, but their taxes remain frozen, so that it doesn't go up based upon the improvements that they made for 5 years, let's say, or 10. We do 5 or 10. And so after 5 years, if you give them 5-year abatement, then they're on the rolls fully. So now you incentivize that development. You maybe, in some cases, brought jobs into the city, or somebody living in this building may have been vacant before. And so you've already got economic activity, and now they're living there. You got the building fixed up, and in 5 years or 10 years, it goes back on the rolls completely. And completely in the sense that the market value after that 10 years is what they're taxed on. So we've done a good thing. We have revitalized neighborhoods that we are having trouble getting people to invest in because of the deterioration, because of there may be environmental contamination. I mean, that's one of the issues we've been dealing with for a long time. As jobs and people moved out of the city, they left behind a lot of deteriorated infrastructure, vacant buildings, and a lot of environmental contamination, whether it's asbestos, whether it's lead paint, whether it's ground contamination from petroleum products. It's all over the city of St. Louis. So what we do is try to get people to invest in a neighborhood or invest in businesses or in a building, is to say, okay, we're not going to penalize you if you invest. We're going to freeze your taxes. It's a good deal. And then in 5 years or 10 years, you're going to pay full taxes, and they are. And sometimes they bring employees with them. It's really a good program, and I think it's very fair.
Now, earlier this year, you had a hearing in the Senate, and since that time, you posted this Form E1CR, so certain individuals can claim the credits for income tax paid in other states. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what the impact of that to the city is?
It's minimal.
What's minimal?
I know it's minimal, but I don't know how minimal, I mean, I talked to the collective Robert, he said it would be.
Let me, all those county workflows I talked about before? And I mentioned about 321,000 or so total would be the universe based on census surveys. Of that total, maybe about 4,500. Now that doesn't mean that number hasn't changed, but the proportion was about 1.5% total. Now, if you take out the fact that that was 81% of the earnings tax as opposed to the 19% of the business, then you're talking somewhere around maybe 1.2%, something like that.
Is that an estimate, or is that?
No, that would be an estimate based on.
Who would know that for certain? Is that the collector?
That would be the collector.
Okay. Have you asked him for this information? Have you asked him to do a study about how it's going to affect the city and the budget?
Yeah.
Now that you've got this on
I know we just implemented it February 2nd, but conversation I had with him, he just said his estimate is, at this point, was it would have a minimal impact on our revenues.
okay, and that will be, at what point will we have a better idea of what that impact will be?
Only he would know that.
Okay.
I would.
Can you tell me how you all, what's the authority for the credit? Did you pass an ordinance? Did you change something? How'd you come up with that?
I've got this, I'm giving it to you. It's basically is a collective revenue adopted a regulation that basically takes care of the credit issue. I've got a copy of it.
The collector did this?
Yes.
And again, I understand he's separate from you. Is that something that came through the council or the?
No, that's something that that we talked about. He said he'd take care of it. He did.
Okay, and again, I don't know your procedure, but he just on his own said, we're gonna do this.
We've got a lawyer with us here today.
Bring him on out.
He was involved in it. He'll give you more about the legalities of it. This is Mike Garvin, City Council of the City of St. Louis.
The collector of revenue has authority under the charter to issue rules and regulations regarding collection of tax.
Okay.
Pursuant to that authority, he issued this regulation.
There we go. Now we're on the page. Since I've got you up here, and this is for both of you, but I asked this question of Mayor James, and I think it's a little more pertinent for you all. My understanding is a lawsuit has been filed under the comptroller decision. Is that correct? Against the city of St. Louis?
That is not correct.
Okay. Has it been discussed?
We haven't got any threats.
Okay, and maybe it's wrong. I thought I read somewhere that someone was discussing a lawsuit under that, and I could be wrong about that.
Not on the earnings tax.
Okay. Then this question for Mayor Slay. Earlier, we talked about this NGA thing, and I know you've seen this in the news earlier. St. Clair, Illinois, publicly pitched the idea that the NGA should move there because basically all those employees get a 1% increase because they don't have to pay the earnings tax. How does St. Louis compete with that?
We can compete in a lot of ways. First of all, St. Louis is the best place to put it for a lot of reasons. First of all, 70% of their employees live in Missouri, so this would be much more convenient for them to get in and out. It'll be closer to our airport, which they would use frequently. It's closer to their data center in Arnold, which is on the Missouri side of the river. We also it's very close to the knowledge workforce that they're looking for. St. Louis is known for its technology jobs, and it's we're also very close to a lot of universities, St. Louis University, Washington University, the Cortex, the Arch Grants, and the other T-Rex in downtown St. Louis. And it's close to where a lot of amenities, the cultural and entertainment attractions that their employees are going to like. We have a lot better access, highway and all that. And the other thing is we are a promise zone as designated by the federal government, which gives us a leg up or an advantage when we're competing for jobs and competing for federal programs. We are also a SC2 city, which gives us another layer of designation or special consideration when it comes to the federal government. And it's right next to a choice neighborhood, which we have a grant. So we are close to, I think, where they need to be. The other thing is that this would be good for, if they also look at the environmental impact. We have huge positive environmental impact on the Missouri side of the river because this is a very blighted area in terms of the history of it. We have the old Pruitt-Igoe site, which is adjacent to this site. It gives the federal government an opportunity to remedy the legacy of this failed housing project, which you probably don't remember. You're too young, but it was known all over the country when they imploded all these buildings. These were high-rise buildings where they housed a lot of very poor people in the city of St. Louis. And we have 30 acres of rubble that are there, so it gives the federal government an opportunity to rectify that. And I think that's something that really does interest them. So
we've got a lot of reasons why this is a good site for
I
that.
appreciate all the geographical discussions of the
The
education.
earnings taxes,
But I guess specifically my question is, knowing that St. Clair, Illinois is publicly using that, do you view the earnings tax as an impediment to keeping NGA?
no, I don't. I don't. Because we've talked with the federal authorities. I don't think that's going to be the issue. The other thing is, part of what we're doing in the city in order to get the site ready, because look, one of the things we've got all these vacant properties. They were owned by a whole lot of people. Assembling those sites, remediating, moving all the utilities, and cleaning up the site environmentally, which, by the way, you're all helping us with, and I really appreciate it. But one of the things we're doing from the local level is to put our piece into it to help finance the improvements so that we can make this site ready for NGA. Is we're using half of the earnings taxes they're paying is going to go back into redeveloping this site. So they are going to be, and they know this. I mean, this is something that they know. So I will tell you that I don't think it's going to be an issue.
Okay. Final question. Also, this is, I asked Mary James about this, but obviously I have a lot of concerns about how this tax affects those earning under the poverty level or near to it, because the state income tax, federal income tax, they're all progressive. They all make significant exclusions for those people. Has St. Louis ever considered changing this to a more progressive or exempting certain levels of income?
Here's what I will tell you. There's been a discussion in that regard because it's been brought up recently, and I will tell you that we do believe that there is a equal protection of the laws argument. However, here's what I will tell you from a mayor's standpoint, and I said this before: we are open to discussions about how we approach our tax structure and what we're doing as we go forward. But unless and until we have a plan to replace it, that could be part of a discussion. But unless and until we have a plan to replace it, then we're not going to do this piecemeal. We need to look at the whole thing. I mean, in other words, it's like you either got to get rid of it, or we're going to get rid of it. That would be a bad approach if you just did it like that. But in a discussion on the broader picture, we're open to anything. We're open to any ideas on how we can best make sure we have the best tax environment for jobs, for businesses, and for the people who live in our city.
Mayor Slade, thank you very much. Thank you to the other two gentlemen.
My pleasure.
We've now been here for several hours. I said I was going to limit both sides' testimony to 30 minutes. We've done 3 hours essentially on the con side. If there are other people, I know several people are coming from Kansas City that want to come up and testify. I'm happy to take their testimony. I would urge you not to be duplicative. But if you believe you have something that we need to hear, we would encourage you to come up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Scott Smith. I'm from Kansas City. And I'm here representing both the Civic Council of Greater Kansas City, which, it's on. There we go. So Scott Smith from Kansas City. I'm here representing both the City Council of Greater Kansas City, which is a business organization of chief executive officers of the larger companies there, as well as the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, which has 2,000 member companies. And I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak in opposition to the House Bills 1809, 1857, and 1886. And I will be brief.
Thank you.
Our members come from the whole range of economic sectors that are really important to Kansas City in our development: banking, finance, engineering, architecture, construction, manufacturing, transportation, logistics, IT, telecommunications, healthcare, all the range of businesses that are important. And they also represent CEOs, executives of big companies, small companies, sole proprietors, entrepreneurs, all different generations, and others that care about the future of our community. Our highest legislative priority this year is retention of the earnings tax. It's really serious. It's important to us. And you might wonder why business and civic leaders, many of whom definitely identify as fiscally conservative, would make retention of the earnings tax such a priority. We, our employees, our families choose to live and work in Kansas City because of the high quality of life. We know how critical the earnings tax is for retaining the essential services on which the city relies. safe, secure environment, great infrastructure, attractive and accessible public spaces, world-class amenities are all the things that cause businesses and people to be attracted and retained in cities. Feedback from our members and from corporate relocation experts tells us that taxes are not first on their list of concerns or even near the top of their list of concerns when they think about the major regional areas that they want to invest. They also recognize that Kansas City's position on the state line creates unique challenges for funding the services and amenities required in a major regional center for jobs, recreation, and tourism. Also in Kansas City, we have an effort called KC Rising, which is a regional metropolitan business plan. Last fall, we conducted focus groups with executives of all kinds of companies, all different sectors of the economy. We asked, what was it about Kansas City that made it good to do business there? What could make it more successful? They told us about great schools. They told us about post-secondary education and the importance of that in developing the workforce of tomorrow. They encouraged us to expand the number of investors, helping to start and grow new companies. They reinforced the value of our location and the history of being a crossroads in the United States, and the need for modern, technologically up-to-date infrastructure for that same need. They helped us think a lot about what we could do to attract and retain in the community more talented young people. Not one person.
Mr. Smith, I'm going to go ahead and cut in. 2 or 3 minutes is up. Since we're late, I'm going to be pretty stringent on those time limits. Is there anybody that has questions for the witness? Representative LaFavor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Smith, I don't know that I have a question. I wanted to thank you for coming up here today. I know that you started out here in the building this morning at about 8 o'clock or whenever it was that you drove down here, and so I appreciate you being here. I want to highlight the fact that in my legislative district, and the reason I'm asking you this or bringing this up while you're here is you're a constituent of mine as well as somebody that represents the largest business and civic organizations in the city. There are a handful of districts throughout the state, obviously. There are 2 really wealthy ones. So there's a handful of wealthy ones. The number 1 wealthy one is over in St. Louis, and then the second one is my legislative district. The number 2 wealthiest district in the state is my legislative district because it houses the folks like you and many others who are the business and community and civic leaders of our city. Not only did this tax pass by 78%, through the city, but in my legislative district, the people who pay this tax by and large, it passed by nearly 90%. And so not only are you here, I think, as a voice for business and civic and community leaders, but I have always viewed you as a friend, number 1, but as a neighbor, and somebody who speaks for the residents and the people in my neck of the woods where we live. And so I just want to highlight the fact that not only is this business and civic leaders, but the folks who do the bulk of the economic engineering in Kansas City live in our neighborhood and are wildly supportive of this revenue stream. So as somebody who represents the business and civic interests, but also as a neighbor and as a friend, I wanted to thank you for being here today and providing your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions for the witness? Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for coming to the building.
Thank you.
Further testimony in opposition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Erin Brower on behalf of Hallmark Cards. I'm their state and local government affairs manager, and just here to go on record in opposition of House Bills 2088 et al.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your brevity. Questions for the witness? Seeing none, further testimony in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Rodney Gray appearing here on behalf of J.E. Dunn, a long time, over 90-year corporate citizen. Goodwin, I believe, in the city of Kansas City, where their headquarters are located. They don't believe this is the direction it ought to be headed as a state. I'm asking you to appear here, testify in opposition. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Further testimony in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, Fred Dryling today, representing 2 entities, Jackson County Legislature and Burris McDonnell Engineering, and we would like to go on record in opposition to the bill.
Questions for the witness? Representative Colonna.
Oh, so Cowboys against us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Further questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Further testimony in opposition.
Mr. Chairman, Andy Arnold, Kansas City Board of Police Commissioners, like to go on record against the bill.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions for the witness? Seeing none, further testimony in opposition.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Richard Sheets with Missouri Municipal League. I'd go on record and oppose these bills. Our cities throughout the state recognize that their economies are tied to our two largest metro areas, and businesses in their communities are directly and indirectly connections. Answer your questions.
Question for the witness. Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Further testimony in opposition.
Rich Abishon, representing Sun Midwest out of Kansas City. I'm a state developer, very active in our community, going in opposition.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions for the witness? Seeing none, further testimony in opposition.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Jay Atkins, I'm a registered lobbyist for Hush Blackwell. We have firms in both cities, and I'm here today on behalf of the firms in opposition to bills. Happy to answer any questions.
Did you draft the legal opinion?
I did not personally, but our firm did, yes, and I'd be happy to answer, maybe tomorrow or something, any questions about it. Members of the committee.
If we talk much longer, it will be tomorrow. Questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further testimony in opposition.
Mr. Chairman, Smith with the Missouri State Council of Firefighters.
Questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Further testimony in opposition.
Yes, sir. Matt Maurer, Kansas City Fire Department. Opposition to this bill. The earnings tax really provides the only opportunity where the dog gets charged with taking the meal and crime. It's our only opportunity to recoup some of those. We don't ever want to get in a situation where we're concerned about asking people, are you from Kansas or are you from not my city? We don't ask when we go and come in their houses. The police department doesn't ask when they come over and protect them. We just want to provide the service and deal with it. It's one of the amenities that they get when they come in our city.
Questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Further testimony in opposition. Seeing none, testimony for informational purposes. Seeing none, that will conclude the hearing, and we are adjourned.